Imagine that you sacrificed everything for the future of humanity. Your power, your name, and in the end, your very life. Oscar Sage, the head of the White Tower of Magic, was exactly that kind of person. A leader who went all the way and, along with his followers, made the ultimate sacrifice to save the world. And 20 years pass, he opens his eyes, but instead of the legendary Archmage, he sees a first-rate mage in the reflection. Basic spells, zero power, lost authority. And the White Tower, which he once led, is now on the verge of being expelled from the four great towers. And this is where, frankly, the most interesting part begins. This is not a story about an all-powerful mage. It is the story of a man who once already saved the world, and who is now forced to start from the very bottom. Oscar vows to restore the White Tower to its former glory. But the real question is something else. What will be more dangerous, his enemies or the return of a man who has already died once for that tower? This content is an original narrative retelling by the channel's author, created with a style, its own structure and approach. It does not reproduce the original material literally, and constitutes a transformative work. This child, reborn 20 years into the future, into the past, was considered a living legend. A ninth circle mage, he only sacrificed himself to save everyone. But 20 years later, he woke up in the body of a bastard mage stuck at level 1. The world was no longer the same, but his knowledge remained monstrous. As Oscar examined his body, he realized there was a good problem. He possessed an absurd amount of mana, meaning he could use that power in this life to dominate the mages of the White Tower. In a world where only the strongest rule, several people lie dead in one place. Among them is a man with a sword stuck in his chest. He tries to communicate with anyone still alive, hoping to find a survivor. If they can't speak, he asks them to make any sound, any movement. He practically begs them to do so, but after several attempts, he realizes he is the only one left. In the reflection of his eyes, he sees the head of whoever must have killed everyone, an enemy who united the demons for the first time, initiating a massive war, and brought humanity to the brink of collapse. Not even children were spared, but the mage began to recite a spell in the leprechaun language, and the child who was about to be devoured was saved. She was transported elsewhere, handed over to a woman. This long-haired man, the same one from the beginning with the pierced chest, led the White Tower into battle. He risked everything he had to achieve victory and free humanity. If it weren't for them, that head wouldn't be lying on the ground. Now, to his surprise, a mysterious woman appeared to confirm the death of the high priest. Her name is Etna, the last dragon, the eternal observer of history. Approaching the master of the White Tower, she told him she had good and bad news. The master chose to hear the bad news first. As expected after the battle, the White Tower was invaded by demons. Most of the mages were killed, and their research was completely incinerated. Devastated, he asked for the good news. Edna said the Imperial forces arrived soon after, saving some survivors, and the master's disciples, though wounded. She said it was a relief. Edna asked him if he regretted his decision. The master replied that he did not, that each of those fighters had been personally chosen, and that he could not regret that choice in the face of their sacrifice. Realizing she had little time left, Edna asked if he had anything else to say. The master asked her to take care of his disciples, as they were still very young. Edna assured him that she would visit them from time to time. The master of the White Tower found her formality amusing, and the dragon said he deserved such treatment. She and the continent would never forget the sacrifice of the heroes of the White Tower. The master agreed, but he had his own regrets. He had not been a good leader. If he had another chance, he would have lived selfishly, only for his own people. That was the kind of life he wished he could live one more time. Finally, life left his body. Edna noted the date and time of death of the great sage, Oscar. Everything was documented, along with the deaths of the other mages. We are taken back to the White Tower, where a child seems to be recovering. A small leaf fell on his hand, and that was enough to wake him up. He woke up so abruptly that he ended up hitting the person who was there to take care of him. Confused by the sudden reaction, the person said they were just changing the patient's towels. They commented that his sleeping habits were very strange, and that he showed no gratitude. Even while being cared for, the boy began to wonder if he had really been asleep, especially in such a helpless state. Placing a hand on his heart, he realized he shouldn't be alive. He was sure the demon high priest had pierced his heart with that sword. Oscar immediately asked what was going on, just as a door to his room was destroyed. Another young man is very interested in the fact that he has woken up. The nurse tries to stop this young man, who seems ready to teach the protagonist manners. Surprising them both, Oscar asked how he was still alive. The young blonde man is also surprised. Analyzing his clothes, Oscar concludes he must be a mage from the White Tower. Our boy hasn't realized what happened yet. He ordered the mage to explain the current situation, which greatly angered the young blonde man. He is not willing to explain anything to this boy, who has clearly lost his mind, since he should be reflecting and begging. Our protagonist felt the attack and immediately thought it was an infiltrated demon. He instantly used a wind shield strong enough to break bones. That's what our boy expects to happen, but to his surprise, the shield slowly fades. It was then that he realized that the magic he now possesses is simply pathetic. However, the blonde man's attitude changed completely. He praised the structure of the shield, recognizing that Oscar had not been wasting his time. The disciplinary measure for what he did will be postponed. It is time to focus on his own recovery. Frank, who had witnessed all this firsthand, wondered if our boy was crazy. Maxim's personality, the older one who was in the room, is a bit explosive, but the protagonist is still trying to understand what happened to his body. He asked what day it was. Frank replied that it was September 21st. Our protagonist believes he was unconscious for 5 months, but Frank said only one day had passed. Oscar said to contact Joy Duhealy, as he wanted to know from them what had happened. Frank told him to forget about the traitors, and not to mention the Tower Master's name so lightly. Apparently, he had forgotten what had happened. Joy left the tower to become a disciple of the Red Tower. Gilead stole high-level scrolls. This accusation enraged the protagonist, but he soon realized that Frank's demeanor seemed completely normal. He was not lying. Sasha is now the Tower Master, but to our protagonist, she is only 5 years old. But he has just discovered that he is over 25 years old. Frank believes our protagonist has a very vivid imagination. Finally, our boy decided to look at his own reflection, and at first, he couldn't recognize the image. He began to touch his face, completely confused. After a moment, he realized that 20 years had passed since his death. The city had developed a lot. The streets had artificial lighting, and the vehicles were very interesting. All this is possible thanks to magical engineering. The protagonist's friends would have loved to see this. In their time, people had given up everything, but now it's time for him to focus on the present and learn more about this new body. He came from a bankrupt noble family and was taken in by the tower at the age of 10. And he is a level 1 mage, but he is terrible at magic. At his age, he should be much better, which is why he must have felt pressured. He bought an illegal elixir, and after drinking it, he passed out, which makes sense because, if it had worked, his mana would have increased considerably. Analyzing the body, Oscar realized he should not have survived. It was then that he noticed something interesting. He has much more mana than a level 1 mage, and most of it is still in its purest form. And unrefined, it could be an effect of the illegal elixir. In the middle of that bright glow, a small spot appeared. Our protagonist doesn't know what it could be. Then something dark and viscous dripped from his fingers. Oscar was quite frightened when the viscous liquid fell to the ground. He realized it could be poison, but he doesn't understand why it would be in his body, until he finally reached a conclusion. And now he better understands the situation he is in. The elixir was the perfect cover. This way, no one would find out he had been poisoned. The poison is what actually killed him. If our protagonist weren't so skilled, he would never have found traces of it in his body. Although without knowing who wants him dead, our protagonist is already determined. He has been given a second chance at life, fulfilling the wish he had in his past life. It is time to live a more selfish life, and this is not a bad start. Oscar has decided that he will avenge the original owner of this body. On the outskirts of the city of Syrian, someone brings news to an important person. The man sitting in the armchair asked to be called boss, and now he wants to know the news. His shop was destroyed from within. Some mage is responsible, and that greatly angered the boss. Witnesses say he was looking for the person who sold the elixir. The boss quickly realized it could be Oscar, who should be on the verge of death. It would not be possible for him to fight in those conditions. The henchmen began to worry that the White Tower might investigate. But the boss said his client was an important person. He wore a White Tower ring. At that moment, both thugs were startled. Someone said they were being too obvious with their conversation. It's our protagonist, who has just arrived at the scene. He followed the trail of the essence still left in the bottle, but he didn't expect so many people to be involved. Quite annoyed, the gang leader asked him how the young man managed to destroy his shop. And our boy said he was very interested in the conversation they were having, suggesting they continue with the topic. Hating that petulant behavior, the gang leader ordered his men to finish off the protagonist. His henchman lunges at him, brandishing his sword if they want to resolve this with violence. Our boy will do the same. He moved only one hand, repelling the attack with a wind technique, which was also able to cut off the man's neck. His head now decorates the room. Oscar didn't expect his head to be cut off. The thug's leader was terrified by it. Completely enraged, he decided to aim a firearm at the boy, shooting him several bullets. This was completely new to Oscar, but thanks to his shield, the bullets were not dangerous. Since he didn't feel any mana in them, he began to wonder how they worked. The mafia boss was surprised that the bullets were stopped, although he didn't understand how they worked. Oscar returned the bullets to their owner, leaving the thug riddled. Now that he is injured and on the ground, it is time for him to reveal what he knows. The entire place is isolated by a sound-blocking spell. Oscar wished the man would cooperate a little more, and asked who wanted him dead. The bandit said he would not talk, and for that he tested the protagonist's boots, as his pride is worth more than his life. Our boy is ready to end this, using a spell on the bandit that deeply affected his body. That poor victim of society is going into shock. The wind is inside his body, as if thousands of needles are piercing him from within. Oscar doesn't like doing this to people, because it's too noisy, so he's waiting for the truth. With tears streaming down his face, the bandit promised he would tell the truth. Sitting on the sofa, Oscar told him to tell everything he knew about the contractor. They received the elixir and a lot of money to sell it. It's a cheap price for our protagonist. Oscar wants to know what the man looks like, but he wore a hood that covered his face, so they couldn't see who he was. He wore the White Tower's ring. Our boy quickly realized that the ring was only used to deceive the bandit. Giving more information, the bandit said the contractor had a very particular smell. It was refreshing, like mint. As for what would happen after the boy's death, the bandit knows that the magic tower is very busy, as it lost its position among the 4 towers. There would be no investigation. This last piece of information worried our boy. But the bandit knows less about it than a White Tower mage. Our boy said he had forgotten some things after consuming the elixir. The bandit said he would give him some documents. The poor man had to crawl to his desk and gave the protagonist everything important about it. Oscar began to read them, even after defeating the evil high priest. The White Tower's performance last year was catastrophic. It has been in decline for the last 20 years, and the imperial family is about to make an important announcement. Oscar found the lack of progress strange, as he had handed over several documents to Edna to prevent this from happening. He wants to know what the 4 main businesses of the towers are. Now the Yellow Tower controls lightning and has a great advantage in the era of magic engineering. As it was responsible for public lighting, the Blue Tower contributed to clean water consumption, increasing agricultural production. And potions, the Red Tower is extremely militarized, contributing to the subjugation of monsters. Now it remains to be seen what the White Tower does. Oscar was surprised to discover that they make deliveries. That is simply absurd, given that they have mages who can fly. It is a great advantage for making fast and safe deliveries. Oscar was not aware of these windy nights. The mages of the White Tower soar high in the sky, flying with a freedom and bravery comparable to that of eagles. And dragons, our boy wants to know who had the damn idea to make deliveries. The bandit said it was the current master's idea. This left our protagonist ashamed, as Sasha used to be his disciple. Potions are the largest source of income for a magic tower. He wants to know why the Blue Tower has such an advantage. He discovered that they have a monopoly on the market. 20 years ago, that monopoly belonged to the White Tower. The bandit said they sell clean water at exorbitant prices and bring rain to dry areas. Oscar wants to know why people buy clean water, believing it must be some kind of extravagance for the rich, since it is very easy to find clean water in the surroundings. This year's White Night Festival is his last chance to prove himself. There are only 7 months left until that day. Wounded by bullets, the bandit is dying. He could die soon. Oscar wonders if he should help him, as he received a lot of important information. But then he saw the notes about what the man used to do: arson, extortion, ending people's lives. The man is basically a pile of trash. Oscar leaves through the window, leaving the bandit to his fate. Now that he is out, he wonders if he should be a good person in this life. Upon returning to the White Tower, our protagonist is very tired. He can't even believe he got so exhausted from using such simple spells. In his current state, he may not be able to use the magic that made him one of the greatest mages in history. The Wind Archive. When trying to perform the same technique, it barely held together in his hands. Escrow needs to perfect this body. He began with a magical analysis. He will absorb more information about this body. Soon his memories are in chaos, and if he wants to save this body, he needs to know its history very well. He is the heir to Count Crucian and the sole survivor of a disastrous fire. From a young age, he was recognized as a genius. Great expectations were placed on him. His grades were usually the highest, and the presentation of his thesis cemented his reputation as a genius. Oscar still doesn't understand why he would be at level 1. It was then that he discovered that he suffered from mana deficiency syndrome, which greatly surprised our protagonist. But if that's true, it makes sense that he's only at level 1. He understands magic very well, but he can't use it. The magical analysis was finally completed. Oscar is accessing the results now. That body has no deficiencies. It's not a disease. Someone sabotaged the boy, as the name of the disease suggests. Its carrier cannot accumulate magic. A mage can have up to 20 mana circuits, which determine their level. Without them, it is impossible to exceed level 3, but the protagonist's circumstances are very different. His circuits were tied by someone on purpose. If he was a genius, he should have known he didn't have that illness. It would be great if he had a diary. According to Frank, the previous user of that body was an alcoholic, but that could have been a deliberately created personality, because he already knew someone was trying to end his life, so he started acting like a runaway playboy. If this is true, it makes sense that he succumbed to the temptation of the elixir. Even if he couldn't trust anyone, he had to risk breaking those chains. But our protagonist only has to untie this knot, something he is capable of doing. While manipulating some books, one of them caught Oscar's attention, the reinterpretation of basic magic. He began to browse the book and came across some notes. There were several comments on wind techniques and the concept. In those words, it is very similar to the protagonist's technique, which is not limited to the defensive capability of the wind shield. Old Oscar also believed that he should follow his own intuition. He also created several basic spells, although he could not use them. He performed all those experiments as simulations in his own head. It makes sense that he is a genius. And that's not all. He had not abandoned his own studies and worked harder than anyone. The content of that book is overwhelming for a beginner. He was undoubtedly aware of the danger surrounding him, but he had to do everything completely alone. Old Oscar had to forge his own path completely alone, even while carrying the weight of his own history. All this captivated our protagonist. The time has come to unleash the knot he could not untie, and since he is very skilled, our protagonist will do even more. Those who clipped Oscar's wings will have to pay for what they have done. The next day, the wind blows in the square. Our protagonist doesn't even know why he's walking around that place. The only thing he remembers is falling asleep after trying to untie the knot that blocked his magical growth. Only then did he hear someone call him master. Oscar saw a version of his past self. It's the curse of sleep. Every time he sleeps, he is forced to remember the past. He didn't expect this curse not to have followed him into another life. It seems to be tied to his own soul, but his students' dreams were not corrupted. Everything seemed very calm. He is teaching more about the categories of magic, which can be enchantment, acceleration, balance, or special types. Joyet believes that the White Tower seeks harmony, so wind magic is more suitable for them. Sasha asked if each magic tower has a personal preference. His professor replied yes, as they all have different characteristics. The Golden Tower values speed and acceleration, while the Red Tower prefers enchantment and fire, and the Blue and White Towers opted for balance. Gilead said he wants to learn acceleration magic because he doesn't like anything too slow. The professor told him he can't choose. It's something he was born with, and now he was going to show them how it works. It was Sasha's turn to cast the spell, but since it's her first time, it's going to take her a while. Then at the tip of the girl's finger, something began to emerge. The energy is neither fast nor dangerous. It is balanced. She is of the harmonic type, just like the protagonist. The boy liked this discovery very much. The blonde boy did the same as her, and discovered that he was of the accelerated type. Now it was Joy's turn to do the same. A flower appeared on his finger, a sign that he is a special type. The boy was not happy about this. He asked if he could change his type, but he was told that it was a very rare category. He wanted to be like his teacher, who was flattered by these words. He thought about giving Joy more lessons, on researching a way to change his type. Knowing that he would receive private lessons made the boy very happy. Our protagonist said that special type mages need guidance, as their path is very difficult. But receiving these lessons excited the boy. They made a vow about it. This boy's nickname is the man of his word, although he behaved maturely. At that time, he was still a child. A noise was heard from a loudspeaker. A broadcast is being shared. Someone calls our protagonist, and he doesn't even know how long he's been asleep. But he must go to laboratory 4202. After waking up, he went to the laboratory and managed to unlock 12 of his circuits. He also obtained 2 mana lines that reached level 2. Knocking on the laboratory door, he met the blonde professor who wanted to know how he was. Now, since he had lost some of his memory, our boy said he was fine, which reassured the professor. Oscar finally remembered Maxim. He had been his subordinate and was now a veteran, one of the sages of that place. He had always been honest and intelligent. Our boy hoped he would have a bright future. When he was younger, he used to follow our boy everywhere and always called him master. Happy to know that he had succeeded in life, Oscar started smiling, and Maxim asked him why he was doing it. Then he told him that he had heard about the death of some bandits. He asked if our boy had anything to say. Oscar said he didn't know anything, but he acknowledged that there must have been a reason for that to happen. Since they tried to end his life, he drank a poisoned elixir and presented evidence to support his argument. Maxim then understood why our protagonist had health problems. Oscar said he had tried to talk to them, but he suffered another assassination attempt. Upon seeing the amount of money, Maxim realized that those words made sense. In that notebook, there were notes about the assassination contract. Maxim said he would register everything as self-defense. Oscar thanked him for it, but took the opportunity to ask him for a favor. He wanted to meet the master of the magic tower, which should not be difficult, as Oscar apparently talks to the master frequently. Our protagonist did not expect this. Moreover, he will only be able to meet her in the next 6 months. For Oscar, this is terrible, as it will be after the White Night Festival. She will be on a business trip, taking care of something very important. Oscar asked why she was so busy, but he soon understood that one of the senior mages was absent, which was an embarrassing situation. He apologized for his rudeness, but he wanted to know what level the master of this tower was. He was informed that she had reached level 7. At his age, Oscar was already level 9, and knowing that his student was talented, he thought she should be level 8. Maxim said that the cut on the body found was very clean and asked if the boy had been practicing attack magic again. Our protagonist said he trained from time to time. After hearing this, Maxim dismissed the boy. Outside the office, someone else was already waiting. The old man is the vice master of the place and came to intercede for the protagonist, asking Maxim not to be so hard on him. This old man's name is Gandalf. Yes, I changed the name. Maxim said he needs to discipline the boy, but Gandalf was the one who brought this genius, and he is very worried about him. Even if it's basic magic, it's hard to perfect it at that level. Maxim realized that the boy had trained a lot. He is truly a box of surprises and could be studying much more than he imagined. Gandalf said they had to meet the other elders, who were already waiting. Oscar went to the 10th floor of the tower, the place of his dream. The floor was very empty now, and a gardener found him. This one immediately recognized Oscar. This old man is named Wilty. He is responsible for managing the tower's facilities, and he realized that the rumors about Oscar's memory loss are true. They used to talk a lot. Our boy didn't imagine that the news had spread so quickly, so he asked why they were treating him with such courtesy. The old man said he knew the former master, the great Lord Oscar. Another revelation our protagonist did not expect. That's why they call him Young Master. After learning this, our protagonist asked the old man to continue being his conversation partner, but he told him that he would soon leave the tower. He had been working there for 40 years. During that time, he met 3 masters and had countless colleagues. He had only stayed so long because he had met the great Lord Oscar. He remembers his words at a ceremony, that everyone in that tower is necessary. Our protagonist was moved by this recognition, because he was the great Lord Oscar. Still, the old man decided to leave the place. This surprised our protagonist. The White Tower is not going through its best moment, and its income is not what it used to be. Our protagonist asked if the old man was dissatisfied with his job due to the service bonus, something that happens after 20 and 40 years of collaboration, receiving a prize of 200,000 after 40 years. But the current White Tower cannot afford this prize, and to avoid this embarrassment, the old man leaves before the deadline. That place is his second home, and he cherishes it dearly. Our protagonist had no idea that the tower was doing so poorly. He thought the other towers were doing absurd things just for money. He definitely shouldn't underestimate other people's work in times of need. All our boy has are titles. These don't pay the bills. Thinking about this, he got so distracted that the old man had to call him by name. He was worried about how tightly he was clenching his fists. It was so intense that he ended up hurting himself. Oscar asked him when he planned to leave, and the old man replied in 2 weeks. He quickly bandaged the wound and recommended he go to the infirmary. Oscar wants them to remain conversation friends. He told him he didn't have to leave because there is a way to solve everything, and he will make sure of it, since he knows a method to earn a lot of money, and that something like this will never happen again. Now that our boy remembers what he told him, he started thinking about how he could put it into practice. He can only think of lectures and research, but the payment takes a long time, and he is still a level 2 mage. What he needs is a business that allows him to earn a lot of money, and the only viable option for that is the potion market. It was then that our boy stumbled upon an interesting note. What he found could change his situation. In the vice-rector's office, an argument is taking place. The woman seems very agitated. She can no longer ignore it. This is Fidelina, the person in charge of finances. The vice-rector told her that the culprit is reflecting on what he has done. Fidelina argues that a thief is capable of worse things, but the vice-rector tells her she doesn't have to worry about that anymore, since in any case, there is not much left to steal in this tower. But she insists that the boy be isolated as punishment. Gandalf observes this surprised, as these two are almost 100 years old, and he agrees with Maxim that isolation is too severe a punishment. It would not serve the purpose of punishment. He suggested that the culprit reimburse the tower triple the amount of damages. Fidelina said the budget is too tight. They have to make a decision about it as soon as possible. There are many facilities they can no longer use. If they sold the materials from the potion room, they could secure another 3 months of budget. But Gandalf does not allow it. This is a place for research and study. These tools are necessary. They cannot compromise the future just to pay current bills. But Fidelina doesn't believe there is a future in their current situation. They have already waited 20 years. And before she could continue, Maxine intervened. Still, she continued saying that, even if there were a genius out there, he would severely not choose the White Tower. As they discuss this delicate topic, someone knocks on the door from outside. It's our boy who is going to open the door. And he did it because he has a suggestion to make. He asked Gandalf if he could set up a business. Fidelina immediately became indignant, as he is the one who has spent too much on research. Ignoring her words, he showed her the article he had found about a province that is quarantined due to an epidemic. Gandalf said the news is indeed grim, especially if it is the dreaded chain flu, as there is currently no cure for it. In the past, the tower had a vaccine, but the recipe was lost 20 years ago. And knowing this, Oscar wants to start his business from this point. He wants to sell vaccines for this disease, a monopoly they once had and which needs to be revived. Fidelina said that the boy's fantasies are not even worth listening to. So far, a lot of money has been invested in recreating that vaccine, but nothing has been achieved. And she highly doubts that Bran, at 20 years old, is capable of doing anything. Our boy agrees that he is only 20 years old, but there is something different about him compared to others. He is simply a genius, and there it is, the protagonist's aura shining upon the old guard. Obviously, she was furious. He unleashed an avalanche of comments about the boy's petulance, and he had to listen to it all in silence. In the middle of her diatribe, Gandalf had to intervene. It was a genuine investment suggestion, and although you are in charge of finances, you are being too rude. After that call to reality, Fidelina realized she had gone too far. Now our boy understands why she hates him so much, as she is the treasurer, and for the last 2 years, he has caused her significant losses. However, Oscar asked them to consider his request. He presented the article he had brought and asked Gandalf to look at the second page. Archbishop Baldwin has changed his plans. Oscar said this is very strange, belonging to the Order of Altera. There are only 7 archbishops. They are supposed to be incorrigible, but that is not what happens in practice. On pilgrimage, they stay for up to a month in the cities they visit, but only when they meet nobles and merchants to get money from them. Siren used to be a great city, but that's a thing of the past. Maxim agrees with that, but he believes the visit to the city was for religious reasons. Oscar said that, if that is the case, it is even stranger because that land is cursed. The pilgrimage route is already decided for them, and after Seddon they will go to the city of Vince. In all other cities, they stayed at least a month. Siren was the only exception, and it seems this man is in a hurry to get to Vince. During their travels, if an accident occurs, they believe it is a curse from the goddess herself, and that ruins their campaigns to become cardinals. If Vince has the disease, the bishop is intentionally delaying the trip to spend as little time there as possible. This is how Oscar understood it. Fidelina praised the boy's interpretation, but said it was only a theory. Gandalf also understood these words, but they cannot sponsor the boy based on that. Otherwise, they would not be able to finance the other mages who are here, however. He is willing to invest his own money in it. Fidelina considered this strategy very risky, but Gandalf remained firm, and he offered our protagonist 30,000 coins. The problem is that this amount is not enough. In the potion production room, our boy faces more problems. It's time to implement Plan B. He is going to make just one sample and try to get the Archbishop's sponsorship. Since the pandemic puts him in a difficult situation, charging someone desperate is the best he can do. Oscar is fully prepared to implement his plans. After a little work, the first vial was ready. For Oscar, it is not a bad result. It is an energy drink. He made it just to practice a little and confirmed that he still has skill in making potions. Frank, who was carrying heavy things nearby, began to complain of back pain. But he brought all the materials Oscar had asked for and asked if there was anything to drink. As he felt on the verge of fainting from exhaustion, Oscar handed him the recovery potion. It tasted very good. Frank asked if she had prepared it recently and praised the mixture highly. In any case, he had chosen the freshest herbs for the process. Oscar said he had a good eye for it and that he should be a merchant. Frank replied that he wanted to do it after the White Tower finally went bankrupt. But he ended up receiving a few blows from our protagonist, who could not stand to hear that. Returning to the main topic, he asked what they should do now, and Fidelina said she should help our boy. Oscar realized that, in the end, she also wanted to help the tower. It was time to organize the ingredients, but he didn't need an assistant for that. The tower has some problematic young people, and with the right guidance, They could contribute a lot to this place, and one of these troublemakers is Frank himself. Our protagonist is curious about him. It's time to get to know him better. In fact, he realized something when buying those herbs. They are all poisonous. Black lilies, carnations, and devil's mushrooms. Oscar said they have value as medicine and asked Frank if he knew how to prepare them. The young man said they had to be boiled for 12 hours. That is true. However, nutrients are lost in the process. The best way to do it would be by steaming. That way, they could minimize the loss of these nutrients to an incredible 98%. Just as the White Tower used to do in the past, Frank is very interested in this whole process, and Oscar said it was easier to work this way. Now it is time to remove the toxins. Oscar does this with wind magic to drain everything. He now has a poisonous mist in his hands, but the toxins still need to be isolated. He asked Frank to observe the process closely, which is now being carried out without the toxins. He just has to mix each of the herbs in the right proportions. Finally, the cure for chain fever had been created. After 20 long years, the process seemed very easy. Now it was Frank's turn. Frank watched all this in surprise, as he cannot even use 2 spells at the same time. And that worries him a little. Oscar observes everything. The boy's mana control is not that bad, although it lacks stability. However, he has reached the limit of his capabilities. Oscar asked him what was wrong, and Frank told him he didn't know how to use 2 spells at once. To do that, you have to exceed level 4, and he is only level 3. But Oscar told him he would teach him. Frank knows this is a secret technique, but our boy continued anyway. He told him that Frank should see it as a partition within his own mind. On one hand, using one technique, and on the other, using the second. It's that simple. He had to try it now, as he had nothing to lose. In the middle of the pink mist, another mist appeared. Oscar congratulated his colleague, who had succeeded on the first try. If it was so easy, he asked why this technique had been kept secret. Oscar said people are greedy. They didn't want to teach it to novices for free, and that ended up becoming the tradition of the place. But during the war, that justification lost its meaning. They needed mages prepared for battle. What they need now is to share knowledge, because these are times of need. Like in war, Oscar said Frank had done an excellent job and was very talented. He didn't expect him to make that potion on his first try, but that only happened because he was taught very well. There are still a large number of ingredients. Frank is eager to continue working, as they have bigger tools. Oscar suggested they do it all at once. After a few hours, Frank was completely exhausted. They made 514 vials in total. Maxime interrupted their work, saying they had a problem. The Blue Tower is meeting with the Archbishop at this moment. It might be too late. If they get the contract first, it will be a problem. While the others were worried, Oscar said he wasn't finished yet, that the fever is classified as a B-level disaster. Knowing this, there is still something they can try. Maxime was surprised by this revelation. Fortunately, he flies very fast. The Archbishop's guests are ready to meet him. Baldwin allowed these people in. The mages of the Blue Tower are presenting themselves to him at this moment, and they are already taking seats in his office. He wants to know how the research for the fever cure is going, and it seems that everything is going very well. The Archbishop wants to know when it will be finished, and he has been informed that only the final tests need to be completed. With positive results, they will obtain approval from the Empire Regulatory Agency for commercial production. However, the test cannot be completed in just a few days. They promised to finish everything in 6 months, an unacceptable deadline for the Archbishop. He needs to go to the city of Vince in the next 4 months. The Archbishop's assistant said that more mages had come to visit him. He let them in too, but he assumed they were mages from the Blue Tower. When he confirmed they were not with the people in his office, he became curious about who they might be. Our protagonist makes his entrance now, and introduces himself as a level 2 mage from the White Tower. Moreover, he is there to make an irresistible offer. Baldwin was surprised by the presence of a White Tower mage in his office. Oscar got straight to the point. He said he was there to sell the cure for the Calden fever. Baldwin said it was perfect timing, as the other mages were there for the same reason. And Oscar asked if he was late. The Archbishop replied that he was not, because the Blue Tower had not finished yet, which was great news for our protagonist. The jealous blue mage called Oscar a liar, saying that the White Tower had neither the money nor the technology to research a cure. But the Archbishop remained interested and asked if he really had a cure for the problem, and stated that he would never lie to a man of the church, and showed him a sample of what he had produced. Intrigued, the Archbishop wanted to know how many vaccines he could produce, which angered and outraged the jealous blue mage. The Archbishop told him to stop shouting, as it was they who had come to the meeting unprepared. Only then did the mage remember something important about bureaucracy. He asked if Oscar had the Empire's approval for it. Our boy said no, so the jealous blue mage took the opportunity to say that the White Tower had no advantage. nor the infrastructure to produce the vaccine en masse. Oscar was angry because the jealous Mage belittled the history of the White Tower. An ego clash was about to occur, but Oscar confirmed that the White Tower has more history than them, as it is 5 years older and despite being small. That is a difference. The Blue Tower could not close even in 1,000 years, which is true. In fact, 20 years ago, the potion monopoly belonged to the White Tower. The Blue Mage said that was a thing of the past, and that no one remembered it anymore, words that greatly angered. And genuinely Oscar, letting out some of his dark aura, terrifying the Blue Tower Mage. Oscar was willing to teach him a lesson, but they were interrupted. The Archbishop's secretary said there was an urgent call for him, and it was from the Lord of the city of Vince. To the Archbishop's surprise, the Lord had called to thank him for his kindness, as he had sent them the cure for that dreaded disease. The elders of the White Tower had done it, saying that everything had been prepared in secret, and that the Lord should be grateful for what had happened. Pleased with the news, the Archbishop asked if the vaccine had any side effects, but he soon learned that it was incredible. Now he wants to know when the second shipment of vaccines will arrive, as the White Tower representative stated that the Archbishop would be the one to decide. So he said they would do it as soon as they were ready. Upon ending the call, the Archbishop asked if that was Oscar's doing. The Blue Mage tried to say that the boy had broken the rules, but he was brutally silenced. Oscar said he understood nothing about laws, let alone war. Only then did our boy remember that they were in peacetime, that things had changed a lot, and that the most effective weapon of the demons was diseases. They took time to produce, and even more time to be approved by the regulatory agency. This led to a new law that accelerated the treatment of those wounded in war. Classifying them as special cases, the Blue Mage said they were not at war. But remembering the law, Oscar stated that there are 3 cases to consider. The first is conflict between species. The second is between nations. And finally, when a disaster of Class B or higher occurs, and this fever falls into that category. So the regulatory agency's intervention is not necessary. The other Blue Tower Mage decided to intervene, and said that if the useless ones of the White Tower could do it, so could they. However, the Archbishop had already made his decision. Everything was over the moment he received that call from Vince, and the Lord already believes they are working together. Is there no turning back from what has happened? The Blue Tower Mage even offered to do it for less money, but that only made things worse. The Archbishop does not want to compromise his image for money. He ordered them to shut up and leave his presence. The Blue Mage stood up very disappointed, but said that Oscar would pay for what he had done. Before leaving, Oscar mentioned that he had already patented the vaccine. If the Blue Tower also wanted to produce the cure, they would have to pay him royalties. This enraged the Blue Mage so much that he burst a hemorrhoid. The other mage said goodbye to the Archbishop a little more politely, and just as our protagonist asked, he left a trail of an essence that smelled like mint. This left Oscar quite thoughtful, and perhaps confused about his personal orientation. Now that they were alone, the Archbishop wanted to talk a little more. It was time to talk numbers. The Blue Tower had mentioned 2 million coins. Oscar said that if those guys wanted 2, he could accept 5. The Archbishop was surprised by this aggressive negotiation. A few hours later, the news reached the White Tower. A check for 10 million had reached Fidelina's hands, and she was practically in shock. Oscar was responsible for this, and is being overwhelmingly praised and recognized for his actions. Even Gandalf is impressed and wants to know what happened, as the Archbishop would not give so much money. Oscar said there were some additional expenses. Advertising costs. My God, this protagonist is not playing. The White Tower was going to make an official announcement, stating that the Archbishop had a revelation about the epidemic. So they managed to make the vaccine in time. As he wants to become the next cardinal, receiving a revelation from the goddess is very useful to achieve that goal. That's why he paid so much. Now the White Tower has to ship the vaccines in just 1 week. Gandalf is impressed by all this. The amount is absurd. Fidelina has already forgotten the punishment she wanted to impose on the protagonist. Oscar said he needs mages for the job, those above level 4. An announcement must be made in the tower, and Fidelina asked what she should say. Gandalf told her to invite mages level 4 or higher. They would be paid and receive meat in every meal. In a few hours, several candidates showed interest in the tempting offer. Oscar asked his superiors to pay attention, but they all immediately ignored him. Our boy used a sound spell that started to bother everyone's ears now that he had their attention. He said they had to make the vaccines and that he needed everyone's help. But some of the elders were not so willing to listen to the protagonist. Oscar did not expect something like this. He asked Frank why they didn't like him, and the boy told him that the protagonist had done many things in recent years. He is annoying and arrogant, as well as being an alcoholic. A girl had some questions. The production method of the vaccine had been lost, and she wanted to know how they were going to do it. To the spectators' surprise, Oscar said he had recovered the method. They immediately thought he had wasted money to get something unproven. However, Oscar assured them that he had already conducted tests and that the White Tower already had a contract for it. Knowing that leaking the recipe could be catastrophic, everyone became very nervous. So Oscar was honest. He doesn't know why those students are still in the White Tower. The girl did not like his attitude and said that she had wasted her time coming there. She added that anyone with common sense would not stay to listen to what he had to say. However, Oscar said that he knew what each of them had to sacrifice to remain in the White Tower. He knows that Lena, a level 5 mage, was recruited by the Red Tower and rejected several offers. Apparently, the protagonist had read the files of each and every one of these supporting characters, even the girl with glasses who seems to belong to the B-list cast. She even admitted that perhaps he would not have had the willpower to refuse the offers that they received. Despite this, no one left the White Tower. Lena realized that the elders knew that the students were being recruited, but they had no choice but to pretend that nothing was happening, as they did not want to pressure the students. And right now, this is the darkest and most hostile winter the White Tower has ever experienced. Still, the mages decided to stay. That's why Oscar decided to trust them and share the recipe. If he couldn't do it with such loyal people, he couldn't do it with anyone. But if they didn't want to help, that was fine. He wouldn't understand. Our boy even pretended to cry. Now it was time for the level 2 mages to get to work. Oscar put on his personal protective equipment. Lena began to approach him. She asked him if she also had to wear protective goggles, and the others seemed more willing to help too. Frank never thought Oscar could be so convincing. One day, he even told his colleagues that the meat in their meals was not pork, which caused some comments. But as long as it wasn't rat, there was no problem. However, everyone became enraged when they discovered it was veal. The vaccines were made to perfection, 140% above the required amount. A week later, Oscar was walking through the tower and saw petals on the floor. The old janitor must have done it. He must have returned to work. After all the good things that had happened, our boy was now reading the newspaper. The pandemic had come to an end, and the Archbishop's image had been reinforced by all of it. Everything went according to plan. Frank happily approached with news. The vaccine orders kept coming in. Even the Empire was interested. Oscar said that for those who did not want to die, it was obviously necessary. But that demand would soon decrease. After this pandemic, the next one would take decades to occur again. Still, Oscar assured him that money would not be a problem. He already had new potions to produce. Frank thought it would be something miraculous. Of course, Oscar assured him that they would be low-level potions. The boy thought it was the Star Tier, a very famous potion from the White Tower. They say it can even bring the dead back to life. Making it now would cause many problems. First, they had to increase the power of the White Tower. Since Frank was already there, Oscar asked him to bring more materials. It was time to get to work. He asked for some herbs that are mermaids, the main product. However, Oscar learned that the fields where these herbs were grown no longer existed. To Frank's dismay, he went to the field in person as he didn't believe it. And they couldn't go by carriage, as the road was a bit bumpy, so they had to walk a few more kilometers to reach the place Oscar wanted to visit. Oscar was also surprised by something else. He mentioned miles, but now they used a different unit of length. The meter was something he would have to get used to again. After walking for a while, they found a house. Frank knocked on the door, hoping it was inhabited. A mysterious man opened the door and asked who the visitors were. As they introduced themselves, several cars approached the place. An apparently wealthy man wanted to know if the owner was thinking of selling him the land. The owner was an old man who undoubtedly seemed to have consumed steroids recreationally, and he was not interested in selling that land at all, almost like an emissary of Satan. The potential buyer made absurd offers, but the old man did not want to sell. He is called Ivan and he is a herbalist, insisting greatly. The buyer said the land would lose even more value with the arrival of factories. However, Ivan knew that as long as he was there, the factories could not be built. Knowing that he would get nothing, the buyer decided to leave. Before leaving, he acknowledged that he had stepped on some herbs and decided to compensate for the damage. He left behind a large wad of bills. Ivan just watched the men drive away, but the buyer noticed the visitors' clothes. They must have been mages, and he began to wonder what they could be doing there, soon discovering that the White Tower had made a lot of money selling vaccines. This enraged the buyer with his driver for not having told him. Now, with the support of the White Tower, it would be even more difficult to buy that land. Willing to play dirty, he asked if his driver was still in contact with the mercenaries. Now he wanted to end the old man's life and have him declared missing so that the land could be auctioned off. It would be suspicious, but that buyer had the necessary political backing for it. The problem was, what would happen if the White Tower decided to intervene? However, the buyer believed that the White Tower was nothing more than a bankrupt institution. And nothing more. Later, Frank observed the stars. Ivan had let them spend the night there, as it was late and the journey back was long. On foot, Oscar agreed that Ivan must be a good person. He remembered what they had talked about before. The man was very loyal to the White Tower for all that had happened. They also learned about the buyer's reputation. He was involved in shady business and was also violent and criminal. For 3 years, he had been buying land in that region, and some herbalists had disappeared. Ivan said he could not be a target for that thug, and had not sold his land because he was a great defender of the region's herbal culture. For this reason, he had the protection of the imperial family, which is why he had resisted for so long. Oscar asked why he didn't sell the land at an absurd price, and Ivan replied that the answer was obvious. He loves this land. It has been his home since he was born and will be until the end of his days. That's why Oscar agreed that Ivan was a good person. This place was far from the city, and the stars seemed to shine brighter. Frank said he envied that lifestyle, that it must have been much quieter and pleasant. A genius like Oscar should understand it even better. Our boy said that Frank was also promising, but Frank thought they were just empty compliments. Oscar said that was not true, as he would never do something like that, and having had access to old Oscar's notes, he didn't understand why Frank was considered problematic. In the past, Oscar could see the stars easily, but now the city lights prevented him. Frank wanted to know if they could really revive the herb industry, and our protagonist said it wouldn't be impossible, but that they had to talk to Ivan about it. The next day, that's when our boy reacted with surprise. There was someone else there with them, 4 in total, and Frank also began to worry. Oscar realized that Frank hadn't noticed their presence. These people were not friendly. One of the bandits had already proposed ending Ivan's life, but he was rejected. He realized that things had changed. The old man accompanying him didn't even care. He just wanted to get paid. The third man with them told them to stop talking nonsense. There could be a mage in that place, so they should be cautious. The youngest assassin was ready to enter the house, using his skills to pick locks. He believed Ivan must already be asleep. He carefully entered the house and went straight to the bed, believing it would be an easy task. It was then that he realized something that terrified him. He ran out immediately, terrified, but our protagonist had already used one of his spells. Piercing the stranger's skull as if nothing, Oscar realized that the wind bullet was a very useful technique. Conceived by old Oscar in his notes, using practical concepts of firearms, Oscar left knowing he had to do the same to 3 other people, but was surprised to see only 2 men, an old man and a redhead, when asked what he had done to the other bandit. Oscar replied that he had let him sleep forever. The old man expected something like this to happen to that stubborn guy. The redhead asked for the herbalist's location, saying he would ignore what had happened to his companion. Oscar will not. Then the redhead said there would be violence. He ordered the old man to attack, and he did with the vitality of a young celibate. But our protagonist defended himself with his windshield. After stopping the attack, it was Oscar's turn to move. The old man was impressed by such agility, but he was already prepared to surprise our boy with another blow, revealing that his spear could split, becoming a very versatile weapon in this way. The old man believes that he will finish everything now, but the protagonist had already cast a spell on the tip of one of his fingers. Oscar said this fight was too boring, throwing 2 small spheres of wind at the old man, who tries to defend himself from them with one of his swords, tries to stop that attack. Seeing that the metal was not strong enough to absorb the impact, the sword was destroyed. Oscar said the weapon might be versatile, but it was still useless. But just then he felt a real danger, something visceral, and our boy immediately moved away from the old man. Someone had just brought a firearm into the battle. A shot was fired and the old man's skull was pierced. Our protagonist remains on high alert. The redhead had done that to his own companion, and said that if the protagonist hadn't moved away, he would have also been injured. Oscar asked if they were not allies, and the redhead explained that he was a subordinate. He can be replaced, which is why he hates criminals, as they have no scruples. Oscar wants to know what that toy is, and the redhead stated that it is too expensive to be just a toy. Our boy believes it has 3 spells: acceleration, strengthening, and penetration. This made the redhead much more serious, as our boy had figured everything out. Oscar said he had to do that, as he hadn't been able to block the attack, and despite his arrogance. The redhead acknowledged that he was talented. He even asked him if he would like to work with him, stating that the pay would be very generous. But Oscar refused, as he would end up with an intense itch on his head, if you know what I mean. With that, there was nothing more to discuss. Oscar had to seek refuge from the gunshots. The former master of the White Tower is cornered, with only half of his mana available. And knowing that wind bullets are slower, he has to think of something. The only chance is when the enemy reloads the weapon, which can only fire twice. and it takes 1.5 seconds to reload. In the middle of the plantation, the redhead is looking for our boy, looking for an opportunity to act. Oscar charges forward using an acceleration spell, but the redhead finds him easily, and even mocks the moment. It would be impossible to dodge that, and his aim is completely clear. But to the thug's surprise, the bullet did not pierce the wind barrier, it simply went around it. Now Oscar has the opportunity to attack. While the bandit reloads his own weapon, he is trying to understand how that happened. Something happened to that shield when he looked forward again. Oscar was already pointing his finger at him at point-blank range. In his last moments, the bandit tried to understand how a low-level mage had done all this. Oscar said he would never understand it, even if it were taught to him. After finishing off the enemy, that object caught Oscar's attention. A very problematic artifact that he recognizes. On its body is written Trinity. It must be related to acceleration, strengthening, and penetration. A truly incredible weapon. Beating him was not easy. Oscar used friction reduction on the shield, causing the bullet to circle around it instead of piercing it. But if the theory had been wrong, his body would have been fatally pierced. Upon returning to the tower, he decided that he needed to learn more about how to defend himself from things like this. But now he had to make sure Frank and Ivan were safe. After all, our boy had felt the presence of 4 people. In the middle of the forest, Frank is protecting the old man. He told Ivan to go ahead, as he would take care of holding off the thug. He assured him that he was very strong for a novice mage, and that he would meet the old man. Soon, Ivan decided to follow his advice. Wishing Frank to be cautious, the bandit said he was too confident, and Frank asked him why he hadn't decided to pursue Ivan. However, the bandit is more interested in this mage, his future victim, although the old man was his target. He wanted to know why people still respected the White Tower, so he decided he would end its life first. Before anything else, rushed forward impetuously. But Frank used a wind cut to defend himself. The bandit not only dodged it, but also attacked right after saying it was too easy. About to pierce Frank, he asked him to do something more fun. It was then that the bandit realized something was wrong. He didn't feel like his sword had pierced anything. Something was wrong, and when he realized, his sword had already been grabbed by Frank's hands, and his neck, well, his neck was no longer so intact. The poor bastard is dying, drowning in his own blood. Frank was indeed hit by the sword, but revealed that he has a rather peculiar physical constitution. And unique. After that, the thug's body fell to the ground, lifeless. Our protagonist is hidden behind a tree. He saw everything. He realized that Frank is not just a special type of mage. He has also managed to turn his body into wind. To defeat him, only energy swords or powerful magic would work. Our protagonist has only seen something like this in books, and about one of the ancient masters of the White Tower upon appearing in the clearing. Oscar ended up scaring the boy. Frank asked him when our boy had arrived. Oscar said he was worried, but congratulated Frank on defeating the thug. Now they needed to know where Ivan had gone. Frank started shouting his name, and our protagonist realized that France's head processor could be a Cordu, which is not very good. It could even be a Pentium, feeling the elder's energy. Oscar pointed in the right direction. At dawn the next day, Ivan thanked them for their help. If it weren't for these young people, he wouldn't be alive. Frank said he hadn't done much, however. The protagonist insisted on saying that he had let one of the thugs escape, and that Frank had been instrumental in the old man's survival. This ended up embarrassing Frank a lot. Now everything is resolved, or so they think. But that damn buyer won't give up. Ivan said that this land is the best in Siren, and that its location is perfect. In the last 8 years, the land's productivity has decreased considerably as a result of magic engineering, and its progress, which is polluting the waters. This could be a permanent problem for land exploration and herb cultivation. Oscar has something to ask this old man. He asked if his loyalty was related to the 4th master of the White Tower. Ice and the old man replied yes. Back then, they saw herbalists differently, and they called them sorcerers. They avoided being seen by others, and they lived a nomadic life. Until a savior appeared to help them. A man famous for his ideas reigned laws, who invited them to live in that city so they could have some peace and rest. Not even Ivan knew so many details about the history, and our boy said he had learned it from a book. But only the Tower Masters have access to it. He didn't mention that part. That's why the herbalists gathered in that city for the first time. The nomads had land and amenities. The White Tower gave all this to his ancestors so that he would never stop being grateful. Oscar thanked the man for his hard work. He stated that the White Tower would still be with him. But due to what happened, the imperial family would not remain silent about this attack. The problem is that bureaucracy is slow. However, Oscar guaranteed that this time they would be very fast, as he was going to sign a contract with them about the chain fever vaccine that very day. In the damn buyer's office, there is a lot of haste. They need to flee. Things had gotten very complicated, But that wasn't going to happen because armed men arrived to bring justice. The superintendent of internal affairs of the empire came personally to capture that thug. The accusations are numerous, and he is about to leave that place in handcuffs. If he resists arrest, hopefully, he won't get out of there at all. The bandit tries to say he is innocent, but the judge will decide. Sweating profusely, the thug realized he needed to contact his superior to escape this, so he asked to smoke his last cigarette. But the superintendent ordered his men to handcuff him immediately. They were wasting time there. The bandit said it was a mistake and asked if they knew who was protecting him. But the superintendent ignored the threat. After all, he had orders from the emperor to resolve the matter, while they took the bandits away. One of those men asked the superintendent a question. "I wonder who that guy is." They acted very quickly. He must be someone important. They received orders from above. It seems the emperor really loves the White Tower, but not even the superintendent understands it. He knows the heroic past of the place, but that was a long time ago, and the present is unfolding differently. Looking at the sky, the superintendent told his subordinate that it had all happened 20 years ago. He was 12 years old then, when humanity finally won its freedom from the demons. And in those days, the White Tower was a completely different institution. The oldest still remember that era, the glory of the past, but now they have to leave. There is still work to be done. They head east to find the factories that are polluting the region's water sources, something the superintendent is doing on his own initiative and now thinks of Oscar and Frank, the white mages who took care of everything and dismantled a dangerous gang. The subordinate asked if they could eat first, but the superintendent said they would do it later. Back at the White Tower, Frank feels relieved, and Oscar goes to report everything to his superiors. But before they could enter, Gandalf found them. Frank tried to make an excuse, saying he had something urgent to do. Gandalf was surprised by the young man's sudden departure, and Oscar explained that he simply had something to do. Getting straight to the point, Gandalf said that Oscar had handled something important, and that he would hear the report in his office, to which Oscar was already heading. Once there, Oscar noticed that the old man seemed a bit downcast, as if something had happened. Gandalf asked him if he had heard anything from Frank. Oscar replied no and asked if something was wrong. Apparently, the Sirius family was going to take the child away. Our protagonist wanted to know if Frank had agreed, but Gandalf was not sure. It seems that the negotiations about the matter were already closed, and he does not know the details. Frank was already packing his things in his room when he heard a knock on the door. It was our protagonist, who already knew what was happening. Frank is the youngest son of a great merchant family in the Empire. He has to return to his family's business and get married to continue its tradition. By all indications, this is an arranged marriage. Frank knows the girl is a good person. Our protagonist asked him if he agreed with it. The boy said that, although he didn't know her, his future wife must be a good person. But Oscar wasn't referring to the marriage. He asked him if abandoning magic was really the right thing to do. Frank became sad upon hearing this, believing he had no talent, so he was giving up. The boy thought he was special, so he went to the White Tower where there are fewer prodigies, hoping to stand out, but he soon discovered the reality of his situation. As he vented, Oscar told his friend to listen. He thought he would scold him for what he had said, but he was surprised to hear that he was very talented. This seemed to change his focus. Although happy with the compliment, Frank still didn't consider staying. Then his older brother arrived and quickly assumed that our protagonist was a friend. But he told them they had 5 minutes to leave. Before he could leave, our protagonist asked the man how much it would cost. To be precise, he wanted to know the price of France's stay in the tower. The man demanded to know who our protagonist was. To make such a proposal, Oscar confirmed that he was a friend and the one responsible for making the vaccine. Gronk then introduced himself. He is the brother of that fool and the eldest son of the family. Ignoring Frank Ard, the protagonist made his proposal, and Gronk began to think he was an idiot. A child wanted to negotiate with them, but our protagonist guaranteed that there would be no losses for either party. In 2 years, Frank would be one of the best long-term mages. It would also be very beneficial for their family. Grant was intrigued by the proposal and asked what would happen if they failed. Oscar offered the profits from the vaccine for the next 50 years, guaranteeing that the tower's vice master would witness the contract. Then Grant asked if he went so far because his brother was worth something, or if he did it just out of friendship. Our protagonist said the answer was obvious. The boy was truly valuable. He wants to restore the White Tower's reputation, and for that to happen, Frank is a key piece. Grant said the boy was very young, but as a merchant, he could not ignore the other party's naivety. And he decided to add a condition, because Oscar had forgotten something fundamental. Merchants value trust above money, and the protagonist had to prove his worth. He had a level 5 knight as a guard. The next day, Oscar would have to demonstrate his skills in battle. Only then would he agree, as our protagonist is a level 2 mage. The knight would not use energy on his sword. Oscar realized they didn't want to give up the marriage, a sign that the other family must also be influential. As they left, Grant said they would meet again at noon. If our boy didn't show up, it would mean he had given up. Frank was now desperate, worried about what might happen to his friend. This was happening because his older brother was furious and wanted to humiliate our protagonist. Frank suggested they try to talk it out, but the protagonist remained firm. A level 4 mage could win. Frank was completely surprised. He couldn't believe the protagonist intended to reach that level in a single day. However, someone who was already stable at level 3 could advance to the next level. And the condition was not to win, but to demonstrate their skills, something the protagonist could do. Because his strategy was much more interesting than that. The level 4 mage who would step into battle was Frank himself, in the training room. Frank was restless. He had tried for a long time and still hadn't succeeded. Our protagonist told him to trust him, to relax and start circulating mana through his circuits. Observing his concentration, Oscar said it was satisfying, however. He made some key observations about the areas where he was losing energy in mana circulation. Frank asked if all geniuses could see that, and our protagonist said he was the only one. Surprised, Frank asked if fixing it would level him up, but the protagonist said it was irrelevant, since most mages ignore things like that. However, it is something that archmages do not ignore, and from now on, he would do it every morning. Our protagonist gave a long theoretical explanation of what needed to be done. Frank had to pay attention to all these details to continue evolving. Now it was time to address something else that had happened before, the magic he had used during that battle in the herb garden. Frank apologized and said he couldn't do it, making it clear it wasn't for lack of confidence in the protagonist, but because he was terrified. The last time he used that technique, he almost died. He felt more anxious as he grew, because his family had high expectations of him, so he decided to focus on what others could not do. He tried not to limit magic to just one part of his body. If he were made of wind, he would be incredibly powerful, a thought that turned out to be reckless. At first he thought it had worked, but then he panicked. He couldn't stop the reaction. Half of his body turned into wind, and his mana went out of control. Naturally, Frank panicked and asked for help. If he hadn't received help, he would undoubtedly have died at that moment. He couldn't do anything on his own and still remembers that feeling, something he never wants to experience again. However, the protagonist pointed out that he used the technique very well. Frank explained that it activates naturally in dangerous situations, which is quite pathetic. But our protagonist didn't see it that way. Mages face problems, and the solution to this one is very simple. Frank needs to learn to control his mana even better. The problem is that it depends on talent, and he doesn't know how to fix it. Oscar confirmed that there was a way to perfect this skill. After drawing a summoning circle on the ground, Frank asked if he was going to make a pact with a demon. Our boy said no demons would appear, even if he called them. What he was going to summon was a spirit, a wind spirit, to place it inside Frank's body. Determined to improve, Frank made a great oath to the wind spirit, but nothing had happened so far, since his affinity with spirits was very low. Frank said he felt a slight breeze, but the protagonist assured him it was just his own sigh of disappointment. However, he should not be discouraged. Few humans have an affinity with spirits. Frank despaired once more, as this was his only way to better control his mana. But the protagonist said there was another method, a spirit summoning technique he had learned in his past life in the company of elves. Now it was our protagonist's turn. He was sure that the king of the spirits would remember him. In the past, he hadn't done it in a training room, but in front of the world tree itself. With just a few words, Oscar asked the wind spirit to come to him. A strong gust of wind swept through the place. Indeed, he succeeded on the first try, and a spirit appeared before him, asking if that human had summoned him. It was the first time in 27 years. Oscar said he wanted to make a contract and asked if the spirit needed anything. The spirit assured him that formalities were not necessary, but asked if he wanted to establish a friendship connection with the higher spirit. Celeste, our protagonist, replied no. This surprised everyone greatly. Only then did he remember that he should have started with that part. Actually, the one who needed a spirit was a boy who was also there. The time for the duel had come. Everyone was already gathered. Gandalf was also there, acknowledging that the inventor of the vaccine was indeed very stubborn. They introduced Grant's knight. He was indeed level 5. The battle would be simple. Whoever took the other's necklace would be the winner. If there was no winner in 5 minutes, Grant would accept defeat. Oscar liked these rules and was eager to start. They asked him if he was okay fighting in those clothes, to which our protagonist replied yes. As he was not the one who would be fighting, Frank finally presented himself to them. This left his brother completely speechless, unable to understand what was happening. Oscar recalled the terms of the bet. He had to demonstrate his skill, and he had masterfully taught Frank the day before. Grant was furious about this, assuming that by putting his brother forward, his night would be easy for him. But the protagonist disagreed, as he believed that a level 4 mage had a better chance of winning. Grant was surprised, knowing that his brother was level 3 until yesterday. However, for Frank to become an elite mage in 2 years, our protagonist had to demonstrate his methods. Grant told his knight not to take it easy, and our protagonist told Frank not to be afraid. He just had to do what they had been taught. The boy tried to muster courage, but he accepted. He was now completely determined to win. The knight greeted the young master very courteously. Finally, the start of the match was declared. Frank immediately began to create distance, moving away from the knight. This was also part of the strategy. It was then that the boy felt a threatening energy, approaching him in the form of a dangerous sword. Absurd pressure. That enemy was truly level 5. Even without using energy, he was still intimidating. Frank was almost paralyzed by fear, but slowly he began to remember the protagonist's words from the day before. Oscar was also being an excellent friend. Enough to make Frank even braver, he managed to produce a wind sword in battle. It was time to claim victory. It was the first time in his life he had heard someone say they needed him. When attacking, Frank didn't want to disappoint our protagonist. The knight defended himself with ease, but realized that the young master had become stronger. He could even use 2 spells at once, but it might not be enough, and the knight decided he had observed enough. It was time to go on the offensive. Frank was already cornered. Blocking that attack would be impossible. Still, he used the wind sword once more. Grant watched the fight from the side, curious to know how his brother had progressed so much in a single day. He asked the protagonist if he had used any forbidden techniques, but our boy assured him that the method was safe and that he had no reason to worry. However, Frank's growth was evident to everyone watching the fight, but the knight was determined to win, given that Frank was not a battle mage. A bureaucratic job would be much better for him. After being pressured, the knight was about to remove the necklace from his neck. Grant thought he had won, and our protagonist said the battle was over. This left the young man very intrigued, not understanding why the protagonist had started to smile. Last night they trained hard, wind mastery was perfected. However, Frank was still traumatized. He would not be able to easily turn his body into wind. However, it was still possible to use the spirit's power. Oscar was about to explain something very interesting about the contract, the part where he could use great power. The unit, capable of turning anything it touched its body into wind, had to hide this until the end of the battle to surprise its opponent. The knight didn't even have time to realize it, but something had happened right before his eyes. Frank had the necklace in his possession and also the victory. Not even Frank himself could believe what had happened, but after a moment, he began to celebrate it like a child. Grant knew that technique was from the wind god, something his brother should not be able to use again. Gandalf said the match was over and asked Grant if he agreed with the result. But the young man was completely surprised, as our protagonist had only taught his brother for 1 day, enough for him to reach a new level of power, so he decided to admit defeat. Gandalf said it was a long journey, and it was a shame the young man had to leave so soon. However, Grant asked them to take care of his younger brother, acknowledging that he had matured a little more since then. Frank didn't understand that it was a compliment. He asked his brother to repeat it, but the latter had already lost patience, so he decided to leave. Oscar found his friend's actions very amusing. Frank did it on purpose, pretending not to have heard the compliment, but the next day, he faced a harsh reality. He would have to go through that door, except it didn't look like a training room. That dark energy seemed to come from a prison. Our boy said it had been used as one, but that was hundreds of years ago. Frank said he hadn't done anything wrong, and asked why he had to train in isolation. But it was an order from Gandalf himself, who already had high expectations of the boy. Frank was devastated, as he hadn't even had a chance to rest. It was up to him to use that time to perfect his techniques. Our protagonist said he could do it, but the poor boy was heartbroken. As the door closed, our protagonist apologized mentally, as he was the one who had requested this training. 30 days of isolated training. Oscar said it was absolutely necessary, knowing it would be difficult to endure. The old man acknowledged that they had to take good care of the boy when he returned. In addition, the young man's family business shared its distribution route for free. Oscar quickly realized that Grant was a visionary. The success of the White Tower could bring them great prosperity, which was not bad for anyone. It was excellent news. The old man also had something to ask the protagonist. He asked if he would like to give a lecture. Oscar was surprised by this, acknowledging that he was capable of doing something like that. However, he was supposed to focus more on the potion department. Intrigued, our boy asked Gandalf if there was any specific reason for it. The old man realized that our protagonist grasped things easily. He asked him if he had ever heard of Mage Night, a day when mages from each tower gather to showcase their skills. and their growth. It was created by the emperor so they could bond. But in practice, every time it is held, they fight. It should have been cancelled long ago. Oscar wondered why the old man brought up the subject. Now the details will be announced by the imperial family in the new year, and Gandalf's real fear was the Black Tower. As they wanted to be among the top 4, the White Tower could be attacked, therefore they had to be cautious. This was more than enough to fill the protagonist with determination, like a JoJo character. He guaranteed he would do it while walking down the corridors. Oscar was furious. The Black Tower was arrogant enough to think they could do it. At least Frank was now level 4. Everything happened because the spirit remembered that our protagonist had kept his promise. The truth is that the spirit did not like being summoned by one person. Only to make a contract with another, Oscar summoned the spirit once more to give him a message, to tell Salafian of Silence that the White Mage had returned. At first, the Wind Spirit was furious because our protagonist uttered the name of the Spirit King. But what surprised him most was the true identity of this human, which made the Spirit King give an order. Oscar said he wasn't going to spoil the fun by revealing who he was. They were informed that if the Freon had already given its approval, it would not be a contract, just a transplant. That's enough for our boy. He also has a message to hear, a reminder of an old promise he made, a promise that our protagonist intends to fulfill. He couldn't fulfill it in his past life because he ended up dying. His lecture was announced, a reinterpretation of the fundamentals of magic before fulfilling his promise. Our boy also has to take care of that family. A redhead boy was passing by and quickly recognized his classmates. While waiting for the lecture, he asked if it was only for level 3 students. Since he hadn't seen anyone of a higher level, a girl mentioned that she thinks the tower is improving, especially since Gandalf himself had encouraged him. It's in the same place where the Imperial Observation Seminar was held. The lecturer must be someone impressive. Hearing their conversation, someone told them to stop joking. They are making too much fuss about something so simple. He introduced himself as Damien, son of the proud Count. The girl, Rosa, said he was being too negative. The tower was finally investing in something, and they believed the lecturer had to be qualified. But among all those present, only a low-level mage was missing. Their conversation was immediately interrupted. Someone had blocked all the sounds in the room. None of the students could speak. Our protagonist said, "It's a pleasure to meet you all. From now on, I will be the one to present you with the reinterpretation of the fundamentals of magic." Obviously, all the mages were surprised, as our boy was only level 2. But discontent could still be seen on all their faces. Oscar announced that anyone with any complaints could leave. Now they were no longer students subject to a professor's control. However, there was a condition. They had to prove they were skilled enough not to need his lesson. The time limit was 10 minutes, and in that time they had to declare that they did not want to stay in class. Something very simple to execute. The students were indignant. It was not simple at all due to the sound blocking spell, but they soon saw it as a test. Since the professor was only level 2, it had to be solvable. It was his way of telling them that if they couldn't do it, they had to stay and listen to his class. Oscar was eager to see their skills. He had intentionally left some openings in the spell, but that didn't mean it was easy. Only a few minutes were left, and no one had managed to do anything, until a boy stood up cheerfully. Damien believed he had succeeded. Our protagonist knew he was a beginner, and decided to congratulate him. The boy said it was easier than he had imagined. Then everyone heard a sudden noise, indicating the end of the 10 minutes. Damien was the only one who had overcome the challenge, and as promised, it was up to him to decide whether to stay or not. The truth is, he was very curious. Leaving would be fine, but the challenge had intrigued him, guessing exactly what the boy was thinking. Oscar decided to give him a prize. He would teach him a spell as a reward. He asked him what basic spell he liked best. Damien said he liked Windblade. Oscar asked him to demonstrate it, and the boy obeyed. After finishing his demonstration, he asked if that was enough. Oscar said it was very good, but he was going to teach him Windblade. Damien asked if our protagonist hadn't seen what he had just done. Oscar replied that it did not meet his quality standards. He grabbed the sword with his own hands. He said it had 2 serious problems. First, this spell is not made of wind, and with that, he crushed the sword with his own hands. Oscar asked if the boy knew what wind was made of, and explained that wind only exists when there is air movement. Therefore, the technique he had performed was not a wind sword. All students must pay attention to this. White Tower magic requires a constant flow, otherwise it will be destroyed. As he had demonstrated. Now, as for the second problem, Damien, you used too much mana in that spell. You could have been much more efficient. Our boy paused before continuing. He considered the boy's background, imagining that he had grown up watching successful mages in his own family, and trying to imitate them from an early age. But executing such magic is not easy, so he achieved it by using more mana than necessary. A bad habit he still retained. Damien was surprised because that was absolutely true. Now that you know the problems, you can improve the technique even further, but it's a shame the student won't stay in class. Damien was convinced by that example and decided to stay and learn, a result that our protagonist had already foreseen. 3 weeks later, rumors were spreading. People said our protagonist was a very talented instructor. However, they believed he was only good for beginners. Even though some level 4 mages attended his classes, the mages who talked about this considered going too. A long-haired girl was listening intently to their conversation. If they didn't leave now, they wouldn't be able to get in. The first one stood up, and then everyone else did the same. After having heard the conversation, the beginner mages were surprised. There were many more students than usual. Even Maxim decided to appear. Our protagonist entered the room and greeted everyone with a good morning. Today, we are going to learn a very important spell. The class was filled with enthusiasm, but when our protagonist said they were going to learn more about the wind, the enthusiasm faded. That was the most basic of the basics. Maxim had only gone there to observe, but felt so curious that he had to ask. He asked our protagonist if he was really only going to teach about the wind. After gathering so many people, Oscar said yes, and asked the old man to give a small demonstration. Simply by opening his palm, the wind filled the entire room. Our boy thanked him for his participation. Then he called Amy, a blonde girl. He wanted her to show her wind too. Completely embarrassed at being chosen, she did as requested. Her wind was very soft and quite comforting. Oscar asked if anyone could explain the difference between the two spells, apart from the physical characteristics of the wind. The same student from the beginning of the chapter spoke of mana temperament. Our protagonist said that Veronica's answer was correct. The same spell varied in mana temperament, and that is fascinating, even though the formulation process was the same. One was powerful while the other was soft. Such an intense difference that it's hard to believe they were of the same type of wind. Oscar asked if anyone could explain what mana temperament is. A student asked if he meant the 4 types, which are actually the 4 systems. To learn about mana, the temperament, they had to go back to the roots of the White Tower's balance. He asked if anyone could say why the White and Blue Towers represent this. A student replied that it was because of the elements they mastered, which was correct. Red and gold are strong and fast, but not harmonious. There is no cold fire. However, wind and water can be infinitely cold or hot. That's why they represent balance, but there is a difference between them. The conditions for heating water are very simple. At atmospheric pressure, you just need to apply energy. However, heating air is an even simpler task, as it assimilates easily with its surroundings. As he explained this, some students felt a warm breeze while others felt a cold one. Oscar said that wind is the element with the most freedom. It can be strong like fire, fast like lightning, or freeform like water. Depending on the mage's imagination, this element can have any temperament, harmonizing with anything. Oscar asked what kind of entity the wind represented to them in the middle of the class. Maxim seemed completely absorbed in the lesson. Our protagonist immediately realized what was happening. Worried, he told the student next to the old man not to touch him. Oscar told everyone not to disturb him. The old man was going through a process of enlightenment. What he was experiencing at that moment was his own awakening. After a while, Maxim opened his eyes again. Our protagonist asked him how he was. Unfortunately, Maxim had not managed to reach level 8. Still, he hugged our protagonist with joy. Taro Oscar said that, since Maxim was the head teacher, our boy was the one who should thank him. Thanks to this, our protagonist's future classes would be much easier now that he had earned Maxim's respect in front of all the mages. And the greatest gain from all this was attracting the attention of Veronica, one of the people old Oscar had taken notes on. The next day, he went to the training room, as Veronica said it was an interesting place. But our protagonist needed to find out why she had looked at him with such pity when she learned that he knew nothing about that training room. Upon reaching the door, Oscar began to have his own suspicions. Only 3 of the 300 training rooms were like this. Perhaps he was indeed special. Once inside, he began to observe the place. The energy seemed very different, and the artificial intelligence initiated a conversation with our boy to offer him training support in that place. Realizing it was magical engineering, Oscar quickly perceived that the Golden Tower was generating a lot of money. The artificial intelligence asked him if he wanted to enroll in personalized training, but he refused. Then it asked him what level he wanted to do, informing him that there were 100 training programs in total. Oscar decided to start with the first stage. 3 balls appeared before him. The boy had to destroy them using magic or physical attacks. Before hearing further instructions, our boy popped all the balls. Getting an idea of the difficulty, he decided to raise the level. Our protagonist reached level 100, and the artificial intelligence warned him that from level 80 onwards the test was dangerous because the balls moved extremely fast. Oscar did not expect the device to be so dramatic. While doing stretches, something whizzed past his head. He had to destroy 1,000 balls without using long-range magic, and could not take more than 10 hits. Knowing the rules, Oscar began to attack the balls. He quickly realized that at that rate, he would run out of mana. It would be better to use as little as possible. So he began to attack with a gust of wind so small, it looked like needles. A large number of balls were destroyed. Our boy's strategy seemed correct, but he still had to be careful with the attacks. If one of them hit him, it would undoubtedly hurt. After a while, panting heavily, they congratulated him on completing the stage. Our boy acknowledged that it had been a great warm-up. This training is done by the mages of this generation from an early age, which indicates that they are better prepared. Oscar stood up and decided he had to continue training, but ended up being surprised by a visitor. Veronica had gone there. He didn't think our protagonist would take his advice, but he said his personal philosophy is that a healthy body is more important than a healthy week. Oscar had just come to see the facilities and wished him a good training session, but Veronica knew that phrase came from the great sage, Oscar, not Oscar. She knew that old Oscar used to belittle her greatly, even though they were both orphans. And Veronica didn't understand this change in behavior. Talking to the AI, she set the difficulty to level 50. She also asked if there had been any changes in the ranking, and the artificial intelligence replied yes. To her surprise, an anonymous participant held the first place. He had completed level 100 in less than 10 minutes. She asked who this person was, but for information security reasons, the machine could not reveal it. Veronica began to think that an old man might have done it, but only level 5 mages could perform ranked training, as it had been in less than 10 minutes. It was the first record of its kind on the entire continent. She soon realized that the protagonist might have been responsible for this record. Back in the corridors, Oscar thought that the next day he would be sore. When he met Maxim, the two greeted each other amicably. Maxim told him he had something to ask him. Fidelina said that the merchants were not buying potions from the White Tower. They must have found out what happened to the Blue Tower. Our boy disliked this commercial retaliation. To make matters worse, the breakfast line was huge, which only increased his frustration. The boy overheard a conversation between other classmates. Oscar realized that those two were Wind Knights working as delivery people. Our protagonist quickly understood that doing deliveries was not very profitable. The only good thing was the citizens' appreciation. And those Wind Knights were motivated because they were well rewarded when they worked hard. This caught our protagonist's attention. He decided to intervene in their conversation, wanting to know if they met people frequently during their deliveries. They told him yes, because they had to collect the signature of the person who ordered the item at the time of delivery. Oscar thanked them profoundly for this information and rushed out of the cafeteria. He ran to speak directly with Gandalf. His idea was to use the delivery service for door-to-door sales. Gandalf didn't think it was very practical, as the potions made by the White Tower were not used in daily life. Our boy said he could make new ones, and that it wasn't even necessary to innovate much. They had a very good recovery potion in that place. It could be adjusted to suit specific groups, reorienting them as their main market. This way, it would be possible to sell more products in a single sale and reach more people. They shouldn't call the potion. A few days later, an old man was sitting in the square complaining that he no longer had as much energy as before. It was then that an air knight appeared before him. He was there to deliver a letter to him from a distant friend. The two chatted briefly, and the old man said he was no longer the same. He didn't have as much energy, so the air knight asked him if he wanted to try something. It was the Magic Tower's latest creation, a very effective tonic. And the name of that tonic was Steel, which sparked the old man's interest. It was aimed at the elderly, as it strengthened the immune system and increased energy. The seller asked him if he knew the other old man down the street, who, after taking that remedy, was preparing to go hiking in the mountains, despite his knee problems. In confidence, the seller told him that the White Tower prodigy, Oscar Crucian, was responsible for the preparation of the tonic. As our boy's fame had already spread, the old man asked about the price of the medicine. He learned that it only cost 30 coins and that it was recommended to take one a week. But he found the price a bit high and had already been scammed by other fake advertisements before. However, the seller insisted, stating that he would never deceive him in that way, because the White Tower was different. In fact, I have a proposal for you, because something interesting is going to happen in this city. And upon waking up, he began to think that it might be a side effect of the tonic. All day long, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He ended up meeting with the other elders of the village, who thought he had died, since he had been missing for several days. They were playing chess competitively. Our old man was doing much better, as he could concentrate more on the game. One of the veterans asked him if he had taken an elixir, and another became very interested in this secret. So the veteran had to share with them that he had taken a tonic from the White Tower, and that the promise was not deceptive. Now we move to our protagonist's room, where they are facing very serious problems. Someone was showing our boy what had happened in the newspaper. The Blue Tower was offering a 50% discount on all its potions. Our boy thought it was a great idea, but the girl who told him was very worried because that could wipe out all the White Tower's profits. Oscar was sure that those prices wouldn't last 3 weeks. Still, it was dangerous. The girl believed they would be driven out of the market. Given their proposals, Oscar rejected them all, as the Blue Tower only wanted to pressure them. And using a pandemic to sell drugs could be disastrous for public opinion. Given the risks, our boy asked if the potion stock was complete. The girl informed him that if they stole hundreds of bottles, they wouldn't even notice. For the protagonist, this was excellent. He had a recipe from the Zero series of tonics, and they could sell the potions that way, as it was much better than keeping stock that couldn't be used. His marketing strategy was a progressive discount. The more you bought, the less you paid. As for advertising, they would invest a little in the Information Guild to spread rumors about the M0 tonic. It would be interesting to say that it helps with virility. The girl was not sure if this strategy would work, but the protagonist told her she just had to wait. 3 weeks later, something was happening inside the Blue Tower. That envious mage who appeared at the beginning of the story had a very satisfied air. He is sure that this way they will be able to crush the White Tower. The department head must be very happy. At that moment, the department head approached him and asked if he had read the latest news. Full of enthusiasm, he replied that not yet. His smile irritated the department head, who slapped him with the newspaper and told him to read what had happened. The results were not good, and they had lost a lot of profit with that aggressive strategy. The White Towers, the tonic industry, is a resounding success. They sold 10 million bottles in a month. The jealous one definitely did not expect this. Sales volume was driven by door-to-door sales. In an interview with our protagonist, the participation of the Blue Towers was even acknowledged, which taught them how to make money. They are now in a difficult situation. Looking at the sales chart does not give a complete picture, as public opinion is very favorable to them. Now this jealous man will be very busy, even if he worked for free for the rest of his life. He would not be able to cover the losses. In the eastern part of the continent, the news spread that a great creature was advancing, and men armed with swords are trying to contain it, but their offensive formation is being destroyed. Those samurai no longer know what to do, as this creature is much stronger than them. Finally, someone appeared, and this mysterious person seemed to be looking for the creature. It is time for it to return to its native territory, and if it does not want to, it will turn to dust. A technique called relentless wind was directed towards the creature, cutting it into several pieces. The mysterious woman said that this type of event happens too often. From her clothing, the samurai realized she came from the White Tower. The woman went to talk to Yang, who apologized for appearing in that manner. Finally, she removed her hood. This is Sasha, the master of the White Tower and disciple of our protagonist in his past life. She wants to know if the leader of the 9 Dragons sect brought what she asked for. And then they got news from the Empire. A lot of news is spreading about the White Tower. Sasha is scared. She fears that the news is not good, or that they have gone bankrupt in the last 2 months. But what she doesn't know yet is that all the news is very promising. After glancing at the headline, she almost had a heart attack. It was so surreal, it seemed invented just to please her. Sasha hadn't imagined that the delivery service would also be part of it. She hadn't even started with that idea in mind. Her goal was something else, finally. She said she was leaving, indicating that payment should be made to the Imperial account in a few seconds. Sasha vanished into thin air. While traveling, she began to wonder what could have happened in the White Tower, and that he had to check in person. Returning to our protagonist, the blonde girl said he was undoubtedly a mage. But Oscar doesn't know why she said those words. The truth is that he managed to shake up the Blue Tower with a simple interview. Tonic sales had increased significantly thanks to what he did. Other cities are also interested in the product, given that the performance is satisfactory. The girl contacted the army, but they are not sure if they will buy it, or not, as there are no further issues. He does not need to report anything to the protagonist. However, she was very impressed by everything that happened. What needs to be done now is a monthly report on sales performance after managing this step. Oscar can focus on the internal stability of the tower, such as restoring old magic books. Although the old escrow of this life was a genius, it would be very strange to start announcing advanced magical theories. Our boy would like to use someone else's name to do it. Someone respected enough. It would be great if this person fell from the sky. Through the corridors of the White Tower, the mage walks, stretching his arms. Outside, he realizes that he hasn't seen sunlight in a long time. Maxim and Fidelina quickly greet this person. His name is Wayne, and he has been reclusive for a long time, 3 months. The poor man did it for his own research. He is an expert in magical theory. He is overwhelmed by the White Knight of that year and has not yet obtained any results. Fidelina knows that it has been 7 years since this guy started his research, but he seems completely stuck in the face of practical difficulties. Maxim suggested our protagonist as a research assistant, but Wayne immediately rejected the proposal, saying that his research is too complex for a level 1 mage. It was then that they informed him that our boy is already level 2. He was also surprised by Fidelina's attitude, as she was now defending someone she used to hate. Only then did he learn what had changed in that place. All the mages seemed much happier, as if they had won the lottery. This was due to our protagonist, who is now exploring his full potential after being properly informed. Wayne was impressed by our boy's skills, and the other 2 elders couldn't stop praising him, stating that Oscar is truly phenomenal. Now that he has been informed, he decided that he would meet with him, but he doesn't have high hopes. The problem is that his research is complex. Observing the same thing from the roof and from the lower floors is completely different. To be more specific, what he wants to find is the restoration of what the wisest of mages wanted in his day. The great Oscar. Later, someone informed our protagonist about a sudden evaluation. It is about Professor Wayne, an expert in magical theory and the recovery of lost magics, forgotten by time and for his current research. He needs help. This type of person is exactly what our protagonist had been waiting for. Wayne apologized for making the boy undergo the test, although he knows he needs help. However, Oscar acknowledged that it was plausible that he was looking for a capable assistant. By ensuring that he would get good results in this test, our protagonist secured the perfect alibi. No one will question the contribution of a level 2 mage, as the professor is the director of the research. The test was easier than expected. A level 6 mage would have had the same opinion. This professor must be looking for someone to help him detect basic errors. His research must be reaching its final phase. Wayne observes our protagonist with some interest. He didn't imagine he would answer the test so quickly, unless, of course, he thinks like a high-level mage, as he is on the last page. Maybe he can really be useful for the research. The problem is that the last questions are the most difficult. Oscar quickly realized that it was about the magic he had created in his past life, and that there are still materials for this same magic in this place. Finally, the protagonist finished the test. Wayne praised the boy's work, but was a little skeptical when answering the last question. Very soon, this ended up disappointing him, but when he started reading the answer, he had to change his mind immediately. All the answers up to that point were correct. Despite the force produced, they need to stabilize the container. Wayne asked our protagonist if he believed that the answer to the last question was indeed correct. Oscar said yes, but the professor is interested in the 4 mana values he had written. Our protagonist used the value of fluid mana and asked if the professor did not think the same. It seems he gave him the solution the professor had been looking for all this time. He asked the boy to use these values in a practical test immediately. Shortly after, Wayne was surprised by what they had achieved. He said he would make our protagonist a co-author of this thesis. Instead of just a research assistant, Oscar tries to refuse, as that would attract too much attention. Wayne said that the last question was something that the previous generation had left behind. By the great Oscar, it is called Ouroboros. Our protagonist still doesn't know why this magic was recovered, let alone why it took 7 years to do so. In this case, it is only necessary to use mana once, creating an almost infinite amount of wind. An infinite source of mana. In theory, for our protagonist, this is a failure. Humanity was able to conquer all elements, but still could not reach the final frontier. Heaven itself made infinity. The Blue Sky Project aimed to break this barrier. During the war against the demons, a ship was developed to gain a military advantage. Ouroboros was supposed to be their energy source, but the project was eventually discarded. Since the magic did not produce enough energy, Oscar remains very intrigued, as this is a formidable source of energy for other purposes. The professor is eager to share the news with Sasha. Only then did our protagonist realize that this magic would be used for a delivery service. This discovery left our protagonist devastated. He dismissed the mediocre result. But for the professor, this is the first step towards conquering heaven. The first in 7 years. Oscar asked him if he wanted to overcome the same challenge from the past. He replied yes, that magic would be the engine. But that's not enough to move the ship. The professor agrees, so they would use other things. These other things sparked our protagonist's curiosity. In 23 years, many things had changed. He said that he now had this magical engineering, something that could change the outcome of the past. During the research of the great Oscar, the Golden Tower also helped and managed to produce magical engineering. Our protagonist realized that he should have discovered this first, but unfortunately, he died using magical engineering. It might be possible to make that ship a reality. The professor's plan is to use a battery. It can be used to constantly increase mana. a strong heart that will pump infinite energy. Our protagonist asked if the Golden Tower knew anything about this research, but the professor said no, as the Golden Tower considers the aircraft a great absurdity. They are researching other things, an iron horse that runs perpetually on land. They call it a train. Knowing who the master of the Golden Tower is, our protagonist knows that he would not bet on something meaningless, but it will definitely not be as impactful as his aircraft. Now he understands the reason for this research. The delivery system is just a way to monopolize the air. The professor said he is right. Goods transport is done by ship and carriage. The train will improve all that, but when the aircraft arrives, there will be no comparison. This could mean a new beginning for all of humanity. Their goal is to reveal this achievement during the White Night Festival, and this has only been achieved thanks to the contribution of our protagonist. Oscar is now positively impressed, as it was a dream he had abandoned, but his disciple did not forget it. Given this, it is time for him to continue helping as a teacher. He tells the professor that they need to delve even deeper. They need to create a prototype to reveal it during that night. A worthy goal for the White Tower will have a much greater impact on everyone present. Instead of just being a simple and abstract concept, the professor, in agreement with the protagonist, the professor decided to share some materials with him, saying they should be read completely. Oscar soon realized that he did not recognize these forms. The professor said it is related to the production of the battery. Our boy wants to know if he can study that for a while. His professor said yes, that material is amazing. Overcoming it will not be easy. But our boy is already full of enthusiasm and wants to start researching immediately. But before starting, the professor has something to tell him. Oscar assured him that he knows how to keep secrets, but the professor doesn't want to talk about it. In fact, he would like to apologize. This surprises our protagonist, thinking that perhaps they have been discovered. The professor said that this is very dangerous. When the Golden Tower finds out, they will do everything possible to stop them, which could put their lives in danger. This news relieved our protagonist. No one knows the truth. Still, Wayne said, the boy is insensitive to real danger, but our protagonist is very aware of it. He simply prefers to remain optimistic. If he lets fear guide his actions, he won't be able to do anything. And that's what truly scares him. The professor was impressed by this determination. When this research becomes a reality, the White Tower will be able to regain its former glory. It is worth taking any risk. The professor found it very interesting, great optimism. Now he is also very eager to start working with our protagonist. On the first day of work, they are analyzing the practical impacts of an equation within it. A pesar de la fusa producida necessitan estabilizar el recipient. 4 days have passed, and they have already made several adjustments to the theory. But they must also worry about safety to make everything more reliable. Oscar remembered that they had already skipped 2 meals. It's time to take a break and have more coffee. However, the lights went out. It seems like a power outage. Lately, they've been happening more and more frequently. Oscar said they should rest a little. After 6 days, he can't stop thinking about something. The professor only managed to complete that research thanks to the boy's help. But our protagonist believes Wayne would have reached the result. In any case, they have advanced too quickly in recent days. The container will truly become a reality. Oscar quickly changed the subject. So as not to get too sentimental, a bell rang for them. Oscar must go to the vice-rector's office. Wayne said he would finish the battery and told his student not to worry about anything. Gandalf spoke about the power outages that have been happening so recently. Due to the frequency with which this has been happening, they need to clean up the power plant. Our boy said he could do it. Gandalf was very grateful, as they couldn't do it before because they lacked staff. Our boy has to get rid of slime so this doesn't happen again. He will do it with Veronica the next day. This part worried our boy a little. Low-level mages are supposed to do these kinds of things in pairs, and she seems to be going through some difficulties. Gandalf suggested that our protagonist encourage her, and he enthusiastically accepted this task, understanding that the old man wants her to have a mentor. The next day, Veronica complained about the protagonist being late. Even though he had arrived about 5 minutes early, the carriage is about to depart for its destination. Veronica said they were not going to an auditorium. Oscar already knows that part. They are going to the power plant, but what Veronica meant is that she is in charge of this mission. As she has much more field experience than him, Oscar understood that he should not act like a professor. The two travel in complete silence. Oscar noticed that she seemed tired. He asked her if she hadn't slept well. She told him to shut up so she could get some more sleep. Our boy wants to know if she is worried about something, because he is thinking of ways to help her. If there is a path ahead, it is better to take it. According to the notes, Veronica has incredible talent. Now, our protagonist wants to know why that has been stated so emphatically. She cannot miss this great opportunity. Our boy keeps trying to win over this girl, But Veronica doesn't sleep well because of the protagonist. She wants to have strong wind like Maxim, and since she can't, she has been training tirelessly, accepting his interest. Veronica asked him how she could help her. Oscar told her that if she had stagnated in her personal development, it must be due to her last class on mana temperament. She said she wants to have wind like Maxim's, but although she has been training a lot, she has not achieved any results. Oscar said the answer is obvious, that path is not for her. Veronica assumed she was being judged, so he asked her if she knew what kind of wind our boy had. She thinks it must be boring and arrogant. Then Oscar said he has a gentle wind, and pleasant, and that he is known for it. Veronica said she had never heard of it. At least that was the case in the boy's past life. However, he doesn't think he has such a warm breeze, and Veronica wants a powerful wind. And warm, mana temperament is not something you get just by wishing for it. You have to find one that suits you, one that resembles you. Veronica began to think about it. If that logic made sense, our protagonist's wind should be boring and arrogant. Finally, they arrived at the power plant. Our protagonist immediately noticed several things. There are several slimes scattered around the place. That's why the power outages have been so frequent. Using wind as a press, Veronica began to finish off the creatures. Our protagonist now understands where her potential lies. Impressive acceleration and exceptional speed. Everything she does is very fast. It would be good if she knew a projectile spell, as Magyar did in his day. Our boy was soon interrupted threateningly. Veronica asked him if she was going to be the only one working there. Oscar seems to have gotten the message. The monsters have all gathered at the entrance. The information made the protagonist think, so he began to analyze the space. Veronica told him to ignore one side inside and start working on the outside. But he revealed that there is something very strange. You just have to observe the creature's movements. They are heading towards the entrance because they are fleeing. Veronica said that slims have no intelligence, and our boy replied that's why they obey their instincts, the strongest of which is survival. Now the girl wants to know if there is any threatening monster inside. Oscar said they had to check for themselves. Inside they saw something very curious. A large cocoon was forming. It seemed to belong to a silkworm. As it feeds on mana, it made its nest inside that place, and at that very moment it was undergoing metamorphosis, so the energy was decreasing. Oscar now had good and bad news during the metamorphosis. The monster is not dangerous. Maxim could handle it in 5 seconds, but when the moths hatch, they are driven by hunger and feed on everything around them. And judging by the sling's fear, this metamorphosis is about to end, and they must prepare for the fight. Oscar was already in position, but Veronica still couldn't believe it. The creature had just hatched and was ready to start feeding. Veronica is terrified of insects. They couldn't flee either, as the monster could attack the nearby city. They had to resolve this situation. Now, facing the danger, Veronica swallowed her fear and told our protagonist to back off. Oscar didn't expect it, but he decided to use a communication spell. The carriage should still be nearby, and they could ask for magical reinforcements. Veronica was ready to use one of her spells to completely defeat the insect. She cast a gust of wind towards the moth. Then she cast another attack spell to get close to the creature. But that didn't happen. Oscar stopped her from getting too close to the enemy and used the wind to show her something. If she touched the creature's droppings, she would melt instantly. She almost died from that reckless attack. Oscar believed the monster had left a gap on purpose, as it was very intelligent. Veronica asked him how he saw the dust, as it was barely visible, and the boy explained that he concentrated mana in his eyes, which allowed him to see the particles in the air. She thought it was foolish, but looking into the protagonist's eyes, she realized he was serious. Now they had to defend themselves, as the monster was enraged, while creating a wind barrier. Oscar said he would teach her that technique later. The situation was becoming increasingly complicated for them, as blocking an attack depleted 70% of the protagonist's mana. On the positive side, that attack took 5 minutes to recharge. Oscar said they had that time to defeat the enemy. Only then did he see that Veronica had been injured and could not move her legs. While blocking the attack, a fragment must have gone through the shield. Feeling useless, Veronica told our protagonist to run. Otherwise, they would both die there. But our protagonist knows when people lie, and the girl was not telling the truth. The air around him trembled violently. A score touched his head, and the air immediately calmed down, and told her that she had no reason to be afraid, because he would never leave there without her. Now everything is fine. White Tower mages leave no one behind. Knowing that he only had 28% of his mana left, Oscar began to accelerate. He had to end this fight once and for all. Seeing him advance, Veronica was sure that the boy was crazy. He should have taken the opportunity to escape. Fortunately, our protagonist had brought a very interesting artifact, the weapon the mercenaries had given him, which should be perfect for finishing off insects. The first shot was fired, And undoubtedly something had just died, but from the protagonist's expression, something had gone wrong. And soon he felt a sharp pain throughout his body. The impact pressure had already dislocated a joint. To make matters worse, when it rains cats and dogs. The creature was ready to attack again. Shooting its attack towards the ceiling, Oscar realized that the creature had been planning its escape from the beginning. But he could not allow that to happen. Unfortunately, he did not have much mana left, and there was not much he could do. Now, with his eyes, he managed to see a thread of silk in the air. Oscar did his best to grab it. He managed to grab the silk thread with his hands. Now the creature was dragging him. Seeing all this, Veronica began to wonder why our boy had had such a stupid idea. Being dragged so violently, Oscar began to feel nauseous, eager to devour his victim. The moth's mouth was wide open, ready to start fattening itself, about to be devoured. Oscar savored victory as his magical artifact that shoots powerful bullets was ready to fire again. But for that to happen, he had to let go of the silk thread. He was about to be swallowed like a pill. In the last second, Oscar managed to shoot the creature's head. This was the proof of his victory, because no living being in this world could survive with a large hole in the middle of its forehead. The situation was finally resolved, but the protagonist had no mana. In complete freefall, it was time for Veronica to prove her worth by saving our boy. She managed to create an air cushion, which softened our boy's fall. As soon as they met, Veronica seemed very concerned, wondering if he was still alive. Oscar was unconscious, and the girl began to imagine that the worst had happened. But finally, the protagonist opened his eyes just after showing signs of life, and was brutally hit by Veronica, who didn't like being scared like that. Maxim finally arrived, very worried about the young students. Our protagonist said he had both arms dislocated. This surprised Veronica, as she had been hitting our boy thinking he was fine. The next day, there was already an article about it. Veronica took it to the protagonist. The journalists had been quite generous. They praised the protagonist's heroic feat, although he was not too impressed by these praises. However, his friends said it could increase donations, but the protagonist did it to protect his own. Veronica said our boy was not very ambitious. Finally, Frank appeared in the infirmary looking very worried. Our protagonist asked him if his training isolation was over. Frank said he heard the news as soon as he came out of isolation and was very worried. Veronica told him he stank. After embarrassing his friend, Oscar noticed something interesting. France's gaze was much deeper and more resolute. He was definitely a level 4 mage. Returning to the main topic, Frank asked Veronica what she was doing there. When asked why they were so close, Veronica said there was nothing between her and the protagonist. After a deep sigh, she realized that there was no point in worrying about rumors. So she refocused her attention on the protagonist and asked if he was the anonymous participant in the training room. The Scrow had no idea what she was talking about and really didn't remember seeing that. Veronica told him to forget the question. Maxim had just arrived at the infirmary and saw that everyone was gathered there. Gandalf wanted to talk to these two young people about France's training and Veronica's honorable actions. The boy was very excited about this, but Veronica seemed perfectly calm. As the two were leaving, Maxim asked the protagonist how he felt. Seeing that the boy was fine, he gave him a small gift. A red box. It was the core of the creature he had defeated. In addition, it was decided that our protagonist could also keep the silk that remained. Oscar was worried about that, knowing it was worth thousands of coins, but the vice-rector had already given his consent. Even Fidalina agreed with the decision. Oscar asked if Veronica had been offered it, but she refused the reward, saying she hadn't helped in the fight. Our protagonist realized that he had to accept the gift. Maxim wanted to know if he would consume it or sell it. Oscar decided that he would consume the item. The creature had just finished its metamorphosis, so it didn't have much mana. But the core helps with recovery. Our boy put the object in his mouth and immediately began to feel changes in his body. Now very calmly, he began to absorb all that energy. Maxim imagined that it must have been the first time the boy had absorbed mana from an elixir. Apart from that unfortunate incident, still, he was very skilled. Oscar finally opened his eyes again and thanked Maxine for supervising our boy, who had just reached level 3. He also felt healed and his body was much stronger. It was time to rest. Looking out the infirmary window, Oscar realized he didn't feel tired at all. He decided to pick up that magical artifact once more. He thought it would be a good idea to create a spell to reduce the recoil of the shots. Meanwhile, a mysterious person appeared at the power plant. A white tower mage was guarding the place and went to identify this person. As he should not be in that area, the man presented a special card. He was part of the royal research team. The security mage quickly realized that the man was important and asked him why he had come to that place. His name was Nebula, and he had direct orders to be there. It is not common for a moth like that to appear so close to the city. Now that he was allowed to enter, Nebula would read the mana traces in the area. He immediately began his analysis. He realized that there were level 2 and level 4 mages. He asked if they were from the White Tower, and the guard confirmed they had come to deal with the Slims. The investigator was relieved to hear this, as he had found the exact location of the battle. The guard mentioned that the moth had been incubating there. Nebula could see where the cocoon was. He also learned that a White Tower mage had initiated the fight. The speed of the attack was impressive. Just after the girl was injured, probably in the leg. He is now focusing on who must have won the battle. He became very interested in the protagonist, who was able to move without leaving many traces of mana. This is one of the cleanest scenes he has ever witnessed. These mages must be very talented. Nebula found a casing on the ground, something in Yashua for a mage, and it was even modified. The mana traces end at that point, however, looking at the hole in the ceiling. He assumed the mage had followed the creature. Even for a level 4, it is exceptionally brave. Increasingly interested, he asked for the name of the level 4 mage. The guard said her name was Veronica. Hunting that creature alone was impressive. Then the guard told the investigator that he was mistaken. The one who defeated the moth was the level 2 mage, and his name is Oscar. This left the investigator speechless. It made no sense. He couldn't understand how a level 2 mage could leave so few traces. But after thinking about our protagonist's surname, he realized it sounded familiar. It didn't take long for him to remember the vaccine incident. This was confirmed by the guard, although the protagonist has personality problems. He is very competent and skilled. Nebula also quickly identified the ammunition. It came from Trinity, the mercenary's weapon. Still, it's surprising that the level 2 mage could use it. The recoil is very strong. Nebula assumed that the protagonist's physical abilities must be exceptional. Clearly interested, he asked the guard if he could tell him more about our boy. Let's go back to our protagonist. He wonders why all the books are in such bad condition. He is in the White Tower's library, which should be in much better condition. In its day, it was a very famous place, with rare and famous volumes, but those days are now a thing of the past. Now it looks like any library. Oscar couldn't imagine that hundreds of years of tradition could be lost like this. He now feels guilty for everything that has happened. He began to recall his last night alive. 20 years ago, he had planned to make copies of all the books in the library, and he is sure that he assigned this task to Edna, but he hasn't been able to find her. It's still not possible that she broke her oath and disappeared for 20 years, especially since she used to be so methodical and dedicated. Oscar decided he would find her. It is time to find advanced magic to improve his progress. With the potions already in progress, Oscar believes he will have a lot of free time and asks a woman for help. She is the librarian. Oscar wants to know if she has any information about dragons from the last 20 years. The librarian said yes and asked the boy to follow her. Oscar was relieved by this news, believing that the White Tower had managed to collect this information. The woman began to pick up some books, which worried our boy quite a bit, because those books seemed to be just picture books, and when she showed him the copies, he realized they looked like children's books, which worried him even more. Oscar asked if the information was limited to books like those. The librarian told him that if he wanted more information, he should go to the capital library. She mentioned that there was a dragon who fought alongside humanity. Our boy asked her if she meant Edna, and the librarian replied yes, that she was the companion of the great Oscar. It seems she returned to her people after everything that happened. Nothing has been heard of her since the end of the war, but our protagonist is sure something is wrong, since Edna was very disappointed with her own people. After thinking about it for a while, our protagonist realized that he would have to find another way to locate her. The next day, Fidelina announced that all external tasks had been completed. Maxim is excited. Given that only a few days ago they were on the verge of bankruptcy, everyone is very happy. Gandalf said they must prepare well so that days like these do not happen again. He also learned that the students remain as loyal as ever. Gandalf would like to return that loyalty to them, but they still need to recover the advanced magic they have lost over time. If only he had learned more when he was younger. Fidelina told him not to be so hard on himself. There are ways to learn advanced magic. The problem is that only the Tower Master can see everything. And when Sasha took over, there were only 6 spells. 20 years ago, that number was much higher. 64 spells, each very unique. Gandalf asked if Captain Chester planned to return soon. Maxim said he has no intention of returning until he completes his last mission. If he were here, he could teach more advanced magic. They moved on to the next topic. Fidelina said that a mage killer had appeared in the northern region. Worried about this, she suggested a curfew starting at 10 p.m. Maxim became very worried, as our protagonist had left saying he was going to Buren. Very worried. Fidelina said he had to return immediately, but the boy left at dusk, and by now he must have been very far away. Gandalf ordered them to contact the Varna branch immediately. Our boy must return as soon as they find him, even though he is talented. He is still a level 3 mage and needs protection while they are worried. Our boy is admiring the big city. 30 years ago, this place was in ruins, but it seems it was bought by companies that manage casinos. Our boy is looking for the right direction, unaware that he is being watched, until a mysterious person calls him, telling him that he had been waiting for him. And this man with a tattoo on his face knows the protagonist's name. Our boy asked him if he was right, and the tattooed man told him that someone was looking for him. Oscar thought it was the Blue Tower as they wanted revenge. Analyzing the man's mana, he realized he must be level 4. Our protagonist asked what would happen if he refused to go with him. The tattooed man said he would take him by force. It was then that Oscar realized he had no choice. The fight between them began. Our boy had to defend himself using a wind barrier, but it was destroyed by a kick pushed back. Oscar was left unprotected. The tattooed man was surprised that he could block the attack. Our boy is surprised that the shield was destroyed with just one kick without mana. If he gets careless in this fight, he will end up defeated. Oscar kicked a can on the ground toward the mysterious man's face. Unexpectedly, the object exploded. It was enough to distract him and to make matters worse. The explosion was very intense. The mysterious man fell to the ground, giving the protagonist the opportunity to grab him by the shirt. Now our boy is ready to perform a judo throw. He slammed the man's body against the ground, as if it were a bag of excrement. Just after the throw, Oscar moved away a little, realizing he had been lenient with him. As he got up from the ground, the tattooed man said, "Our boy is strong, that's why he will have to fight a little more seriously." Said our protagonist, "This man is arrogant. He couldn't even finish the sentence as the enemy lunged at him. He was so fast that it looked like a magical acceleration, and indeed it was, but our boy didn't see him cast the spell." Oscar tried to defend himself with his hands, but the blow went through his guard. Our boy's body flew towards the nearest wall. He fell to the ground, breathless, as the enemy approached. That impact should have left him unconscious, but the protagonist said he wasn't even injured. Furious, the tattooed man promised to finish him with the next blow. Oscar is just waiting for it to happen. I may not be able to follow it with my eyes, but I would never forget how to feel mana, which is his supreme martial technique. The first stage, and he is about to hit the enemy. The tattooed man began to wonder why our boy was hitting the air. He must have been crazy, but soon he felt the pain of regret in the middle of his chest. The poor man is spitting blood. He is also being thrown towards the nearest wall and strategically lands in a trash can. The assassin coughs heavily. Oscar told him not to move or his organs might explode. The assassin wants to know what this technique consists of. Our boy said it uses resonance. That large wind barrier creates a frequency that resonates with the enemy's body. The vibration is amplified and directly affects their internal organs. It's like using a firearm to kill an ant. Without understanding anything at all, the assassin asked how the boy had become so strong. Oscar found the remark strange, as if they had fought before, and the assassin said it had happened several times, usually in the White Tower's gym. Our protagonist remains intrigued. Only then did he decide to ask who was looking for him, and the assassin said it was Gandalf himself. Now our protagonist began to worry a lot about whether this man was not an assassin. They sent him to rescue him, because there is a real assassin loose in the area. Oscar regrets what he did, and said the man should have explained everything to him from the beginning. And by all accounts, he tried to talk. However, our boy remembers very well what he said, that he would take him by force. Only then did he realize that the man was a complete idiot. Communication is not his forte. To make matters worse, that way of speaking is very familiar to him. Upon asking his name, he learned that he was called Kellyanne Rockwell, a proud forest warrior. Now our protagonist is very surprised. He asked her if she knew anyone named Raiden, and he replied yes, as that was his proud father. Furthermore, he was a great companion of the great Oscar. Raiden was from the Forest Tribe, a level 8 mage from the White Tower, excellent in martial arts. Known as the White Lion and close friend of the protagonist, but when he arrived at the White Tower, he proved that his communication skills were terrible. Now our protagonist has just hit the son of a great friend. After helping him with his injuries, our boy was devastated. Kian cannot understand our protagonist's sadness. Oscar insists that he has good reasons for it. The warrior says that the pain does not bother him because he is a forest warrior. However, he has a mission to complete, and due to his injuries, he will not be able to do so. But he did not say this to gain Oscar's sympathy. Our boy has to help him in this situation, because canceling the mission incurs a very high penalty. This made our protagonist feel very guilty, as he does not want to harm the young man. Kian, pointing in the direction of his mission, the voice of paradise. His task is to protect that woman. Inside the Grand Hotel Varen, our protagonist knocks on a room door. He introduces himself as Kian from the White Tower. Marin's manager opens the door for him, and she realizes that the boy is very different from what is rumored. Oscar thought it must be because he was wearing a suit. Marin asked if it was room service, but they told her to get ready. Soon her security detail arrived. The girl went to greet our protagonist, who was instantly charmed by her. Oscar introduced himself as a level 4 mage from the White Tower and asked for some water. Marin thanked him for accepting the assignment without asking too many questions and mentioned that she had heard his success rate was 80%. Our boy began to recall the information he had received from Killian. She is a very famous singer with a very uncommon voice, and he asked her a more direct question. Marin wants to know if our boy is a responsible person. He replied yes, and thought that Killian must be like his father, Mew and Leo. The girl was relieved by this information, as she likes responsible people. Our protagonist found it a very random comment. It was time for him to receive more details about the mission. Our boy has to prevent assassination attempts. Marin has been receiving several threats, lately warning her not to perform in that city. Oscar asked if they had any idea who was doing this. It comes from a rival singer who debuted 2 years before Marin. Oscar asked why they hadn't gone to the authorities yet, but things are not that simple. The manager asked him if he knew what had happened to the mayor a few months ago. The competitor is the only daughter of the city's next mayor, and the bureaucracy in this place is completely corrupt. No one wants to help them, as the city's protection is not guaranteed, so they are taking matters into their own hands. Now our protagonist understands. He wants to know what Ara would gain if the show was not held, as public opinion could turn against her. Marin explained that her show will take place at the Baron Dome. Our protagonist asked what's so special about it. The girl replied that the venue can accommodate 100,000 people, and that whoever performs there will be able to perform for the Emperor during the new year. Many tests must be passed to perform in this venue. It is one of the best in the entire city, and could completely change Marin's life. Our boy asked how many people she had hired besides him, as he needs to develop a strategy, and he was visibly surprised to discover that he was the only one, as no mercenary from that place wanted to take the job. Our boy realized that the task would not be easy. He has to protect many people. He asked what the cancellation fee was, suggesting that the contract should not have been signed. But the girl's mood immediately changed, and she called our protagonist an idiot. She will not cancel the show, as it has been her only goal for the past 3 years. Only then did our protagonist discover that he would receive 1 million coins for the job. Marin angrily thought she was talking to a responsible person and took off her wig. She said she was completely losing control. It was then that our protagonist noticed something interesting. Her ears are very different. That girl is a mermaid. This species is very beautiful and possesses incredible voices. Despite having a fishtail, they can change shape at will, but they cannot do it for long. Marin asked him if it was the first time the boy had seen a mermaid. Now he understands why there is a bathtub in the middle of the room. He thought they would die if they moved too far from the ocean. The manager explained that Marin is a hybrid. Oscar was impressed by this revelation. As mermaids are very beautiful, it is common for them to have strategic marriages. The problem is that if they live far from the ocean, they end up getting sick with nostalgia, dying prematurely, and leaving their children abandoned, as hybrids are not well accepted anywhere. Now our protagonist knows why the girl started singing so young, but soon discovered that her parents are still alive and have a very happy marriage. Oscar was happy about that, but he remains firm. His client could lose her life, and her audience would also be in danger. Marin said the people are safe. There is an artifact that protects the audience, and she is willing to take the risk, which only worries the manager. However, that has been her life's only goal for the past 3 years. Oscar asked her why she was so focused on it. The girl said that it all happened 4 years ago, when her father was diagnosed with an illness. The doctor said he only had 5 years left to live, and now only 1 year left. There is an ancient calendar that can cure this disease. The girl needs to get it soon, so she cannot abandon the performance. If she sings for the Emperor, she will receive a drop of this elixir. Now our protagonist understood everything. That's why the girl is so determined. Oscar is impressed by this girl, and by the influence parents can have on someone's life. Our boy had no parents, so he doesn't know how that works as he grew up on the streets. But if a father figure is similar to a teacher, doing everything possible to save him is something he deeply identifies with. Oscar asked if he could see the stage. Now it's time to get going. Marin needs to practice some things on stage, and our boy wants to check the audience's safety. If everything meets his personal standards, the girl had better not regret performing, even at the risk of her own life. Oscar decided to give her a chance. Meanwhile, at the villain's house, she realized that her rival had not canceled the show. Now there is only one option, which is not bad for her at all, but her flatterer heard a rumor that day. Marin left the hotel with a man. A. She imagines it could be a lover, but it seems to be a guard, as all mercenaries were blocked. She wonders how her rival managed it. She told her subordinate to get information about this man. Back on stage, our boy is observing everything, analyzing the security of the venue. After analyzing the audience's safety, our protagonist decided to proceed with the task. Now they can formalize the contract, which makes the singer very happy. Marin wants to know if she has to do anything else, and our boy assures her that he has already seen what he needed. Feeling happy, the girl is ready to enjoy her freedom. She is a completely different person from the angry woman she was moments before. Our boy will make that money worthwhile, and soon he noticed the presence of two strange individuals, very discreetly. He uses his wind bullet against both of them. Now their bodies decorate the floor. Our boy will not mention what happened. So as not to upset his client, Ara was informed that the two individuals were defeated, and now they are just fertilizer. She realized that her rival had hired someone very competent, and she wants to know how her assassins were eliminated. There were no signs of struggle, but each body had a hole in the forehead. Ara became enraged upon hearing this information, and told her flatterer to prepare the car immediately. She wants to meet this bodyguard. She already knows exactly what to do with him. She wants to hire him. Back at the hotel, Marin assumes our protagonist has never seen this type of food before, and he is still surprised by her personality change. She said they should be cautious. There was a listening device in the room, but he had already taken care of it. Marin is relieved, thinking that no one will know what she says. Returning to her usual self, she asks if our boy is enjoying the food. He said it was very tasty, and that he had tasted it before, remembering that he ate a lot during the war. Marin was impressed by this, as she imagined that the White Tower was very poor. Marin thanked the waiter for the food they were served. It was then that a repulsive voice entered the room. Ara revealed herself to her rival, saying that she had paid for all the food. Marin asked the waiter if the room was not private. He explained it to her. The girl approached him as if she were a friend, saying she wanted to talk to her. He told them to enjoy their time together. Our boy realized that that fool was very influential in the city. Marin asked her companions to leave. Ara told the bodyguard to stay. Marin quickly realized that her rival was going to try to convince him to leave his job, and she went straight to the point, telling him to break his contract and work for her, promising to pay him 10 times more. Marin insisted that her bodyguard would never do that, but our boy replied that 10 times more was a very interesting offer. This worried the singer a lot. He points out that, given that her contract is for 1 million, a fee of 10 million is quite high. But the girl said there was no problem, however, including the penalty. He would have to pay a total of 100 million. He asked her if that would be possible. Ara thinks he is joking, but our protagonist said he was very serious. This ended up annoying the jealous woman. Taking off her glasses and asking his name, our boy said his name is Killian. Upon leaving the room, she said she hoped to see him again in the future, thinking he was a rookie for giving his real name. Our boy wished her the same, but when she left, she showed an expression of deep hatred. The jealous and flattering woman asked her if everything was okay. She replied, no, it's time to call more assassins. But someone told her that this would not be necessary. This person is named Gu Jin, and he has been following the target for a long time. Ara wants to know how he managed to infiltrate the place. He said he received an access card from his employer. He also informed her that one of his brothers was on his way. The plans have just changed. She thought she would have to eliminate the manager at the beginning of the show to destabilize Marin and prevent her from singing, but she just discovered that she also has to eliminate another person. The singer's bodyguard and the jealous rival asked for it to be done painfully. The assassin will infiltrate the next day and prepare for the mission. Ara wants to know all the details and if the assassin needs anything. She is deeply irritated, as she dislikes being underestimated in her own city. Now she will make everyone pay for her wounded ego. Our protagonist overheard everything with his magic. He did it by placing a little mana on her while they were talking, but he is surprised that the assassin did not notice. Getting up, she said, it's time to go back to the room. They need to rest, but Marin has questions for him. She wants to know why he considered accepting that proposal. Our boy asked her if she thought he had accepted that contract for money, and she replied yes. He reminded her that she wants to save her father, and that he wants to help her fulfill that dream. In his past life, our boy didn't have that opportunity. One of his biggest regrets was not being able to save his master. Seeing the girl's dedication, he doesn't want her to have any regrets. Marin was moved by these words and thanked our protagonist. Finally, the day of the show arrived. The production team is working hard. A man is hiding inside the bathroom. It's the assassin, and he's ready to act. Looking at a photo of the protagonist, the assassin waited in the bathroom for a whole day. He needs to meet his ally. If the contract wasn't for 5 million, he would never do this. He knows his ally is wearing the organization's clothes, but as he thinks, he sees something absurd. Our protagonist is washing his hands in that same bathroom, and he is one of his targets. He began to think he should attack him. He now knows he is a White Tower mage, an expert in martial arts, a level 4 mage, but it will be easier to attack him with his partner and stick to the plan. Before leaving the bathroom, our protagonist notices that the man has calluses on his fingers, but not on his palm, a sign that he uses hidden weapons. He asked him if the man's job was to be an assassin. The assassin cannot believe they have been discovered. He thought he should flee quickly. Since he didn't answer immediately, our protagonist was sure he was the assassin, and he decided to attack first. The assassin is not sure if he can escape, so he decided to attack too. The mana-infused blow ended up injuring the assassin, despite not being able to move an arm. He managed to corner our protagonist. He cannot dodge it, all those weapons are poisoned. Our protagonist fell to the ground, completely paralyzed. The assassin believes his plan has worked. He wasn't so sure, but it seems he is now facing a rookie. He just has to finish the job, pointing a knife at our boy's throat. Except that he also ended up paralyzed. An invisible barrier prevents the knife from reaching its target. It is then that the assassin realizes that there is a wind barrier around the body. So none of the needles had reached the target. Our protagonist managed to point his revolver at the fool. The assassin is completely helpless. He can't even believe that our protagonist defended himself in that way. There will be no way to learn that trick either, because his brain just splattered all over the wall. There is only 1 minute left until the show begins. Finally, the lights went out. Marin appears before the large audience. The other assassin is worried, because his companion is very late. He starts to hear footsteps. He assumes it's his companion, who was already quite late. He realized he had missed the meeting point, which is very bad. Upon opening the door, the assassin spoke to the person he thought was his companion. But he ended up finding our protagonist. He was already chasing this other intruder. The assassin realized that they had imitated his brother's steps, a basic trick for our protagonist. Then he revealed that he had blown off the other assassin's head. This, in fact, relieved the companion, because it meant there had been no suffering. Our boy found the assassin's calmness strange, but those kinds of things are part of the job. This was supposed to be their last mission, as they had been recruited by a much larger organization. Knowing that he is from the White Tower, the assassin believes our boy is mediocre and is ready to show what a real assassin is capable of. He reveals his dark power, ready to end everything. This energy is poisoned, like the other one who used hidden weapons, combining his energy with his skills. The assassin created a small black cloud. She goes behind the protagonist. Our boy was surprised to see that he quickly managed to dodge the first attack. If it touches him, he will be instantly poisoned, something our protagonist had already realized. However, he doesn't care. The assassin asked him if he was immune. Our boy said he had coated his body with mana, blocking the outside air. The assassin doesn't think he's going to suffocate, but our boy is producing oxygen inside the barrier. This is the level of the best magic tower, and the assassin didn't realize that his brother hadn't been defeated for nothing. This enemy is strong. Our boy observes everything with mana in his eyes, completely dodging the approaching attack. The assassin can't even believe what just happened, and our protagonist is ready to blow his head off too. But the shadow mana began to move and completely stopped the bullet that was supposed to hit him. This left our protagonist quite surprised, as that poisonous energy completely melted the bullet. Now the assassin has managed to grab our boy by his clothes and is prepared to avenge his brother's death. The assassin managed to kick our boy, who was sent flying out the window, falling to the ground like a huge bag of shit. From the height of the impact, our boy must have been a little injured. He writhes on the ground, and the assassin has already approached him without danger. So far, the audience has no idea what is happening. From the fall, our protagonist broke an arm, and the assassin thinks it's all over. But our protagonist can still use that tool, shooting some bullets at the enemy. Once again, they are stopped by the evil aura, which also melted the weapon our boy was using. With the advantage, he believes this is the protagonist's last day on Earth. At that moment, a loud noise distracted him. Fireworks are also part of the show. Our boy realized that his client remembered what she had been taught. A wind barrier appeared around the assassin, and that proved fatal. He is being seriously affected by this technique. It seems his body has suffered severe internal injuries. Our protagonist acknowledges that this enemy was indeed very skilled. He needed to combine the voices of thousands of people to create that sound barrier. Still, the enemy is alive and tried to attack our boy, but his spatial orientation has been compromised. Our protagonist seizes the opportunity to finish everything quickly, firing a wind bullet through the villain's chest, turning him into a large bag of fertilizer lying on the ground. Our protagonist can breathe a sigh of relief. The day before, he had practiced something with his client. If she heard 2 shots, she should set off fireworks and cause a stir among the crowd. That was all our protagonist needed. And thank God, everything went well. Oscar watches the fireworks in the sky. Despite being a rookie in this job, he did very well. 3 days later, Marin asked if our boy could really leave in his condition. She even called a priest to heal him, but our protagonist said he was fine. However, she had found him on the verge of death and was worried about what might happen. Now it's time to collect. He received 100,000 more out of sheer gratitude. Our boy said that the client's cooperation was crucial to the mission's success. She wants to know if he is staying in the city, as the singer is leaving that same day, and told him to be very careful, as that jealous woman is very vengeful. Now she wants to know if our protagonist will not tell her his real name. This worried Oscar a little. He even tried to change the subject, but she can see his contact lenses, so if she knew that our protagonist wants to know why he didn't back down. Marin said she liked his expression when he talked about his father. It was like seeing herself in a mirror, so she decided to take that risk, even if it was reckless. Oscar said the girl was really careless, but he ended up revealing his name. Oscar and the manager realized that he was the White Tower genius who had created the vaccine. The singer immediately remembered seeing him in the newspaper too. She said he looked too normal to be a genius. Our boy replied that, off stage, she didn't look like a star either, but that when she is on stage, she is bigger than anyone. Marin said, our protagonist is very good with words. She thanked him for everything he had done, and told him that he was the best bodyguard she had ever had. The two celebrated with a handshake. In a hotel in that city, a guy has news to give, one good and one bad. The person there to receive the news is a woman. It concerns those 2 prodigies who were supposed to join them. Neither of them is among the living. The less talented brother is dead. That's the good news. The bad news is that the prodigy, the younger brother, is also dead. This enraged the woman, and the one responsible was someone she knew, Kian Rockwood. According to rumors, she was immediately surprised by this. Then he showed her a photo of our protagonist, but the woman did not recognize the man, and it is impossible for his face to have changed so much, even if they have not seen each other. Anyway, she wants to know who is impersonating her younger brother. His name is Cal Rockwood. Meanwhile, something is happening at the Sweet family's house. The jealous woman's family learned that the Over family is hiring mercenaries. But the head of the family doesn't care, even though that family belongs to the former mayor, who only held office for 2 years and is not that influential. They couldn't even protect their own leader. The man with the mustache reprimanded the butler for saying such a thing. He seeks the classified information of that family, and the deceased son is an idiot easy to manipulate. In just 2 days, something great will happen. Now the man with the mustache wants to know what happened to the boy who saddened his daughter. It's about Killian, a White Tower mage, and Marin, the singer, but he won't mess with the girl anymore, since she has attracted the Emperor's attention. As for the boy, they will keep an eye on him and soon deal with him. Poor protagonist. He doesn't even know that the leader of the assassins and the mustachioed man from the corrupt family are eager to make him pay. Meanwhile, our boy is having coffee with Killian. After eating to their heart's content, Killian thanked our protagonist for his help. He had also managed to recover from the beating he had received. As for the reward, he left it to the protagonist, since he had done all the work. Killian asked our boy if he would return to the White Tower. Now Oscar wants to know if they will take him by force. Killian said he wouldn't do that. He informed Gandalf that they had no reason to worry, as the boy was very skilled. Oscar wants to go to the Blood Tower, as there is someone he would like to meet. He also told Killian to keep taking care of himself, as he has become the target of a powerful person due to the last job. Killian realized that he would have to go unnoticed for a while. His next task was to obtain classified information for $500,000. However, that money does not compensate for the risk he is facing now, as both need to return to the White Tower. Our protagonist suggested that they stay together for now. Killian found that friendly tone strange. Still, it would be good to be in the protagonist's company, as he has matters to attend to in that city. He needs to capture the worst merchant in the history of the Forest Tribe. It is rumored that he is in this city, so Killian has come here, but he cannot give details to an outsider. Our boy hopes to catch this traitor. He said they would see each other soon at the White Tower. Killian asked him how he knew the traditional greeting method of the tribe, and our boy had to make up a story, realizing that his former personality was terrible. But then something surprising happened. Killian greeted our boy in the same way as he walked through the city streets that day. Our protagonist realized that going to the Blood Tower could be dangerous. He thinks Edna is hiding with blood. The tower can find anyone, but in Edna's case, it's a dragon trying to hide. Our boy sensed the energy of someone above level 7 and identified the source of this power. A powerful woman. She looks directly at him, leaving our boy very confused. Her image was blocked by cars passing by on the street. When the view cleared again, she had disappeared. Oscar is now even more confused. The woman's companion said she was being too kind, just because the boy is friends with her brother. Since they saw them together, they should make him pay for what he did to the new recruit, but she doesn't care about that. In fact, she would like to congratulate our boy for getting rid of two useless guys, as he is a level 3 mage. Now there is something more important. She asked if her subordinate could find her, even if she tried to erase her presence. He said he couldn't do something like that, so it would be impossible for a level 3 mage to find her. Kaya feels very uncomfortable, but she is sure. She made eye contact with our boy, and he seemed to know what he was doing. He asked her name once more, this genius of the White Tower, and she found it very amusing. She is eager to see what he will do in the future. Finally, our protagonist arrived where he wanted to be, in the city's blood tower. Inside the shop, the girl asked him what he wanted. Oscar said he wanted to find someone. The girl asked him if he had brought blood. Our boy said yes. Then she showed him where he should go. Finally, our boy entered the other room. Now he needs to collect some blood, although it is an artificial formula. It can replicate dragon blood. He just needs to use a little of his own magic. It should be enough to find her. It was time to put the blood in the device. But the woman asked our protagonist to wait a moment. You have to say what you want to do and pay in advance. Our boy didn't know that detail. In the past, he used to do it for free. Now there are very specific search levels. Our boy asked for the most expensive one. He commented that the service used to be free. The girl told him he was wrong. It was never free. Oscar said he had found out through the White Tower thanks to his old master. In a darker tone, the girl asked him if he belonged to that place. Although she hadn't noticed his mage robes, Oscar said he didn't know who they were, clearly lying. The girl said she was relieved because they had to charge White Tower mages 30% more, as her old master had used the service more than 100 times without paying. This caused great problems for the Blood Tower. The great Oscar was more problematic than she had imagined. Apparently, he never knew the extent of the losses he caused to that place. If the royal family had not covered the debt, the Blood Tower would not exist today. There used to be a free service privilege for tower masters, but our protagonist abused it so much that it was revoked. Oscar asked how much the service cost, and they told him it was only 1.5 million coins. A completely absurd amount for him. He asked if he could pay 100,000 now, and the other 400,000 later. And they told him yes, but that they would not refund the money and that he would only receive the result once he had paid the total. Now he had to sign a contract. The result could be ready in 1 to 3 days. Our boy finally signed the paper, still trying to process everything he had heard. Later, he went to find Quillane, who opened the door looking worried, wondering what could have brought our protagonist there. Our boy wants to know more about that $500,000 task. He is interested. Our protagonist is at the Over family's house. It seems they are very interested in that task, but as the requirements are high, it has not been easy to find capable people. Quillane began to explain the details. It all had to do with the city's former mayor. He wanted to change it completely, even though it seems developed. Many people suffer from gambling and addiction, and the institutions are corrupt. But this type of circle brings money to the city, and the former mayor wanted to put an end to it. His fight against drugs was a complete success. In 2 years, business decreased by 86%, but just after reaching that figure, the mayor lost his life. Obviously, this is very suspicious. It could have been retaliation for what he had done, but so far no one knows the truth, and a document needs to be deciphered to find out. The former mayor cast the spell himself, and this contains a lot of important information. A suspect may be found through it. Our protagonist imagines that the Sweet family is involved in this, but it's the opposite. The head of the family was a close friend of the former mayor and supported the fight against drugs. That's why he is the current candidate. He gained popularity among the public. Oscar is surprised by this, as the delinquent's father seems to be a good person. Some people are already approaching the room. A boy asked if they were the White Tower mages. He is the eldest son of the family. His name is Jack. Jack, our protagonist, introduces himself, as does Kian, and the latter leaves the boy impressed. As he was Marin's bodyguard, the boy is impressed with that star who had executed famous bandits. So he must be a truly incredible person. He cannot hide his deep admiration, while Kian feels ashamed for taking credit that is not his. Our protagonist got straight to the point about the information he needed to access. Jack had heard from his father that there was a lot of shocking information there, but he could not retrieve the data. Oscar asked the boy if he thought his father's death was related to this. He replied yes and became convinced of it. Recently, this information made our protagonist a little more interested. The boy said that after his father's death, he called many people to decipher this information. And on the way to this city, absurd things began to happen, from horse falls to vehicle explosions. None of them managed to reach the city, which is quite strange. Someone must be blocking them. Oscar agreed that it was very suspicious. The boy said he needed to perform a procedure on the mages, showing a scroll made by the Earth Order. He thought the mages would know how to use it. Oscar recognized it immediately. It is a rare and brutal contract. Whoever fails to fulfill their obligation loses their life. The employee cannot compromise the information and cannot reveal it to anyone. But with Jack's permission, it is possible that this firstborn is very dedicated. Before signing, Oscar wants to confirm something. He asked if everyone else in the room went through the same procedure. And the boy replied yes. He has invested heavily in security, so there should be no problem. But our protagonist prefers to check it personally. He asked to be shown the others' backpacks. One of the men immediately became agitated, looking with contempt at the level 3 mage. And automatically, their bodies became paralyzed. Our boy cleverly uses the wind, making those idiots think they are sensing the presence of someone much more powerful. The pressure disappeared, and they were quite impressed. Our boy then repeated his request. Hack understood the message and told his men not to get agitated, ringing a bell. He asked for the contracts to be brought. Our protagonist began a detailed analysis. He asked for tuna and coat. One of the men asked why they had been called, and ended up being pushed back by the force of the wind. Jack is very worried, as he has no idea what just happened. Our boy asked who brought the pact. He said that person should also be confined, because the contract is fake. It's just a normal piece of paper with no divine power. He proved it by tearing the paper, which should not be so easy. These two must have already leaked important information. Following this accusation, the bald man prepared to attack our boy, but Killian is not there just for decoration. He completely neutralized the bald man's attack. Then he rubbed the bald man's bald head on the floor a bit. The bald man said he knew nothing, but Killian wants to know who he works for. Our protagonist believes he passed the information to someone and must know who that person is. All the bald man knows is the number of mercenaries who were hired. Our protagonist believes the culprit will appear soon to collect information, and that he will probably attack with a large number of troops, but it is still too early to give up. Oscar accepted $500,000 for deciphering the information, and another $500,000 for being hired as a mercenary along with Killian. The boy loved this proposal, and he is already eager to close the contract. The materials are properly hidden in a secret place. Our protagonist said he has one too, and the boy was interested in meeting people as cautious as he is. Finally, he revealed the secret passage. It's the first time he's done this for someone else. Upon revealing the case with the secret material, Oscar began to analyze it, channeling mana into his eyes. He noticed several spells around the box, 3 in total. If it is forced open, the box will explode. Jack didn't think it was so dangerous. He wants to know if our protagonist can do it. Oscar said it would be easy compared to what he did during the war. This is almost a hobby. The suitcase finally opened, and the boy was immediately surprised as it all happened very quickly. Now he could examine all this information, holding those papers. The boy began to get excited. He didn't find many clues, but there was evidence of the politicians' corruption. But in this city, that's normal. It wasn't enough for them to kill his father. Oscar is impressed by the maturity of a 10-year-old boy. He remembered that his disciple Joy had also matured very quickly. He decided to help the boy search for clues. It was time to analyze that diary more closely. Then Oscar points to the diary on the table and asks the boy to read that specific part. The boy then asks if there is nothing written in the diary, looking a bit confused and a little nervous. He says he'll take a look and starts flipping through the pages. The entry was dated June 10 and said that it had been almost 2 years since he became mayor. In a flashback, we see that he transformed the city of Buren, which was previously a place of vice. But on July 2, he realized that despite the arrests, drugs were still circulating. He interrogated several dealers, but they were all small fry who knew nothing. Thoughtful, the mayor decides it would be good to talk to his partner, Mark, about the situation. But the conversation is strange, as Mark seems to already know everything he has investigated. At that moment, the boy stops reading with a scared look, and the man asks him what's wrong. Seeing his reaction, the man offers to read the diary if it's too difficult for him. The next page is dated September 1st and reveals that Mark was a cartel executive. With trembling hands from anger, he sees that the next entry is for the 18th. On that day, the mayor had a plan to finally put an end to the entire organization. The boy panics because September 18 was the day the mayor died. In a flashback, the boy remembers Mark comforting him at his father's grave in the rain. He is surprised to realize that the person who comforted him was a cartel executive. Back in the present, the boy cries desperately, unable to believe Mark's betrayal. Oscar says he will pay for it, but the boy believes it's impossible in this city. But the other man comforts him, assuring him that they will make it happen, as they are from a magic tower. Oscar says the situation is more serious than expected. The problem is that Mark could create addiction among tourists and spread drugs throughout the country. His only weapon is the diary. And the question is, when will Mark act to retrieve it? Oscar deduces that he will attack when the citizens are distracted by something else. The other man asks if there is such an event, and the boy confirms that there is, warning him that there will be a big party in the city center tonight. With that, the man suggests that they evacuate Jack and call for external reinforcements. Oscar jokes, surprised that his companion can sometimes make realistic judgments. But changing his tone, he disagrees with the idea and says they will not back down. Inspired, Jack wipes away his tears and firmly declares that he will not run away from the fight. Jack says that if he runs away now, he will never have another chance to avenge his father. Then he says that, if it's too dangerous, he can cancel the contract and fight alone. But Oscar feels a little offended by this and assures him that they will not abandon him. Killian reminds him that Jack trusted them and hired them, which moves the boy with his support. Then he asks him to save the thanks for later and asks if there is a communicator in the house. Hack explains that external communication was cut off, as it was all part of Mark's plan. Faced with this, Killian asks for a crystal ball, and Jack confirms that he has an old one. Needing it, Killian asks to see it, and the boy reveals that it's right there. Oscar jokes about how convenient the situation is, but Killian tells him to shut up, and picks up the object. Upon touching the crystal ball, it begins to glow, which shows that, luckily, it still works. Oscar is surprised and asks him how he knows how to use a relic, and he replies that he learned out of boredom. It was a relief, as it was cutting-edge technology from decades ago that still worked. After using the ball, Oscar asks if the message was sent, and Killian does not confirm. He just hopes the elders don't arrive late, which leaves Oscar completely confused. With a confident smile, Killian simply says yes and that they should arrive on time. The scene changes to the Crystal Ball Management Department, a place full of shelves. Inside, the head of the department yawns and stretches, appearing very bored with his job. Then a young recruit, the only other member of the team, calls him with a question. The boy asks what exactly they do there, as he has not yet received proper orientation. He complains that in 3 days on the job, the only thing his superior has done is yawn. The boss asks him what he knows about the department, and the rookie replies that it's an honor. He explains that his job is to record and analyze the numbers that appear on the crystal ball. A long time ago, before modern technology, it was this ball that connected the whole world. Bringing good times, people used portable versions to send a unique number and thus find each other. The version they use is high-end and has no limit on the number of shipments. The boss then asks the rookie, born in peacetime, if he has ever heard of codes. He reveals that numbers can be combined to form sentences, a method used in wars. The place is a state secret related to the imperial family, and only the elite knows the code. But suddenly, the rookie panics and shouts, desperately calling the head of the department. The boss thinks he's joking, but the boy warns him that the crystal ball behind him is glowing. The crystal ball begins to glow intensely, and the boss panics. He runs to the desk. He begins to decipher the code, which mentions Buren and the Happy Ending cartel. Then he orders the rookie to write down the numbers, as he himself will do the analysis. Together, they discover the cartel's plan to distribute drugs and take control of the city. That night, the boy is frightened by the gravity of the situation, and the boss shouts at him to call national security immediately. The scene changes to a forest, where we discover that the security cameras have been turned off. The mercenary leader Omar announces that they have 5 hours to retrieve encrypted data. But another leader gets annoyed by the wait and decides that his group will act on their own. At that moment, mercenary Jackson also informs them that his men will act independently. Frustrated, the leader kicks the ground, and the point of gathering so many different mercenaries. The problem is that, with 10 groups that have never worked together, the problem is the leader's egos. Seeing that the others are taking action, a subordinate gets angry, but the boss says he expected it. He explains that the contractor's daughter offered an extra reward, so they are in a hurry not to fall behind. The leader finally orders his own squad to advance, with a firm step on the ground. The invasion of the property finally begins. Suddenly, a desperate cry breaks the silence of the night, leaving the mercenary leader confused. On the ground, one of his red-haired men cries out in pain. His ankle is completely shattered. At that moment, the leader realizes it's a trap and shouts for everyone to look at the ground. But another mercenary interrupts him, pointing terrified in another direction, stuttering with fear. He warns that Jackson, the group leader, was caught off guard and is already lying lifeless on the ground. Another scream echoes through the forest, and the leader turns startled towards the sound. He sees his man with a shattered leg and realizes the mines do not explode when stepped on. Several magic circles appear on the ground, indicating that the mines are activated on their own. Desperate, the leader orders everyone to run towards the mansion to get out of the forest. The mercenaries flee in terror, screaming for help as chaos erupts from the top of a tree. A mysterious figure watches every move of the group, with red eyes glowing. Oscar jumps towards them and asks if they feel like dying. In the blink of an eye, he lunges and takes down several enemies at once with his sword. One of the survivors hides behind a tree, shocked to see his comrades fall. Trembling with fear, he silently pleads with the monster to leave. Suddenly, the sound of the massacre ceases, and only the wind whispers through the trees. Relieved, the mercenary spits on the ground, believing the danger has finally passed. He peeks out carefully, determined not to end up like his dead comrades. But out of nowhere, a drop of liquid falls right on his nose, confusing him. When he looks up, he sees Asker looking at him coldly, ready for the final blow. Completely desperate, the mercenary screams in terror at the sight of the figure before him. Without a second thought, he raises his weapon and aims directly at the enemy's face. Then he unloads the entire magazine, shouting at the bastard to die once and for all. But the bullets bounce off a magic barrier, and Oscar says there's something he hates. The man is surprised he hasn't died, and Oscar explains it's the smell of gunpowder. He hates that smell in a sacred forest, and the scene goes black. The image changes to Kian, who was on the roof of the mansion, looking exhausted from the fight. He explains that he used thermal vision magic, along with wind bullets to shoot. He rubs his eyes and says that while the technique is effective, it consumes a lot of mana. Still, he neutralized 67 enemies and uses a scanning spell over the entire area. With a bird's-eye view, he locates himself and the two allied mercenaries in the forest. The radar shows that the remaining 50 enemies were retreating and fleeing. At that moment, Killian wonders if the battle is finally over, but something strange happens. Suddenly, the two allied dots on the radar begin to move at high speed. He doesn't understand why the enemies would run back to the mansion after all. Killian finds their speed strange, as they should be exhausted, and he senses that something is wrong. In the forest, Oscar notices that the smell of gunpowder has disappeared, indicating that the fight is over. At that moment, the two mercenaries come running and call him, seemingly relieved to find him there. They celebrate their victory, saying that the four of them have driven out 150 enemies on their own. But Asker interrupts their celebration and with a serious expression tells everyone to wait. He warns them to prepare to fight, as the enemies are approaching again. The mercenaries charge forward, shouting strangely. Wasker thinks no one in their right mind would return. He hits one of them, wondering if they are on drugs. But to his surprise, the enemy bites his arm with completely unnatural strength. Without hesitation, he responds with a powerful blow, shattering the mercenary's head. In the process, seeing the others on the ground, he begins to analyze the situation and the way they fought. One of his allies notices that this technique is similar to the one used with the tribe leader. Panicked, the other mercenary cries for help, warning that something is wrong with them. Hearing this, Oscar's expression changes, completely surprised by the revelation. In the darkness, red eyes glow and a familiar voice says, "It's been a long time." From the shadows, a woman emerges. Oscar recognizes her as Cal Rockwell, the tribe's traitor. He confronts her, asking if what they say about her betrayal is true, with a mocking smile. She hears the accusation that she stole the king's tattoo. At this, he clenches his fist tightly and says he needs to hear the truth from her own mouth. The scene changes to a flashback, showing that Kaya was the strongest warrior and respected. It is explained that she was an idol to him, but now her image is distorted. He doesn't understand why she did it, or what she gained by betraying them all. It was because of her that the chief went mad and ended up being killed by his own warriors. Worst of all, he was betrayed by the people he loved most in his life. Back in the present, Oscar asks her to deny everything and say it was a misunderstanding, but she simply confirms everything without remorse and even asks what the problem is. Shocked by her coldness, he is speechless and asks if she has any excuses. With a smile on her face, she replies that she has no reason to apologize for anything. Enraged, Oscar shouts that the chief she drove mad suffered a completely dishonorable death with hatred boiling inside him. His eyes glow red, ready for revenge. Oscar adopts a fighting stance and asks Kala if she really wants to fight him. She mocks him, but he tells her that a forest warrior never retreats with a firm gaze. He affirms that he was taught to live as a warrior, not as a wise man who provokes her, asking if it will be okay if he doesn't go help his friend. But he lunges at her, confident that Killian would not lose to simple puppets. From afar, one of the allied mercenaries gasps in fear with his companion already on the ground. He looks back completely terrified by the situation and begins to scream for help. His other companion lay on the ground, surrounded and begging for his life. In a moment of desperation, he thinks about using his friend as bait to escape. but he remembers that his companion had shown him a photo of his son, promising him a family trip. Pressured, he makes the wrong decision and starts running to save his own skin. He flees, screaming with guilt, abandoning his friend who is about to be captured. But then someone grabs him, and he regrets not acting like a true warrior. In the blink of an eye, a white light explodes, sending all the enemies flying at once. The two mercenaries hide behind a tree, not knowing how they survived the attack. At that moment, Killian appears before them and calmly asks if they are safe now. They complain that he arrived late, and Killian asks them what kind of strange creatures those were. One of them explains that the enemies did not feel pain and continued to move like monsters. The other says that the only thing he knows is that Oscar called their leader, Kod. Killian is surprised by the name, as he has heard of this person before. We discover that Kod is actually the daughter of the famous and powerful Raiden. Seeing the enemies approaching again, a mercenary asks Killian if he has a plan. Then he deduces that the control ability is the effect of the legendary king's tattoo. This special tattoo is only granted to the strongest warrior, who will become the future chief. The artifact is so rare that it always returns to the forest temple when its user dies. The technique that drives men mad is a skill called morale boost. But originally, this king's tattoo skill did not work in such a terrifying way. The theory was that, at most, it could turn allies into combat puppets. He is disgusted to see how a sacred technique intended for the most righteous is used for evil. This raises a question for him. Why would Raiden's daughter do this? One of the mercenaries shouts at Oscar, saying that the enemies are still coming. But Killian tells them no, because he has a way to finish them all at once. Then he begins to gather his mana, saying that he will need 30 seconds with a blue aura around him, and asks them to give him that time to prepare. The mercenaries panic at the thought that they cannot fight so many enemies alone. With no other option, they begin to fight with all their might, shouting desperately. One of them calls out to Oscar, while Kieran remains with his eyes closed, completely focused. The other shouts at him to hurry, and at that moment he opens his blue eyes, hands clasped together. He finally finishes preparing his most powerful technique. The name of the spell is Solitary Garden, and it is designed to cover the entire area. At that moment, a gigantic dome of light forms, and he announces that the spell is ready. The mercenaries are surprised, as all the enemies around them have simply stopped. With the spell completed, Killian separates his hands and successfully finishes the technique. Killian explains that he has created an evasion space, cutting off the enemy's connection with their caster. The mercenaries are lost, not understanding what that means in practice. Then he tells them to return to the mansion, but one of them asks if he is not going with them. He confirms that he is not going now, as he still needs to bring a certain person with him. Meanwhile, the fight between Oscar and Kaya continues, with explosions everywhere. She realizes that her mobility has improved greatly, and that she has corrected several of her fighting habits. At that moment, Oscar prepares an attack with a red aura, concentrating all the energy in his hand. This energy transforms into sharp claws, ready to tear anything in their path. With a swift movement, he unleashes the wolf song technique on his enemy. The blow sends her to the ground. Oscar approaches to end the fight once and for all. But to his surprise, she manages to block the attack with her hand and praises his improvement. She criticizes him for being too honest, telling him that he needs to learn to deceive the enemy. Suddenly, she realizes that her control ability has been interrupted, and she doesn't understand why. Oscar says he hasn't deactivated anything and shouts at her to duck because of Killian. At that moment, a gigantic beam of light descends from the sky and hits Kala head-on with all its might. Kia is surprised by the attack and wonders if that wind bullet comes from the White Tower. She deduces that it was the same one that took away her ability, but reinforcements couldn't have arrived so quickly. Besides her brother, she knew that the only other tower mage in Varen was level 3. At that moment, Oscar takes advantage of her distraction and attacks her, telling her not to lose concentration in the fight. But she manages to block the blow with her arm, which breaks from the force of the impact. Mockingly, she tells him he dreams too big and wonders where the sniper is. With a malicious smile, she says that, since he asked, she will find the sniper. Then she uses a magical scanner throughout the forest, searching for any sign of life. But to her surprise, the search yields no results, which irritates her greatly. While she is confused, Oscar attacks again, and she doesn't understand how he disappeared from her radar. She can't believe a rookie can hide or shoot from so far away. He lands another direct hit, and she thinks a low-level mage has barely learned the basics. One must be at least intermediate level to begin to understand the true essence of mana. And a level 7 mage like her is basically a world creator, a true god. This infuriates her, as a weak mage is deceiving her. A level 7. Despite being all bruised, Oscar tells the traitor to concentrate because his opponent was him. Kaya is surprised that he hasn't lost consciousness after taking that blow. Then she gathers energy in her hand and tells Killian to proceed carefully. Or maybe he shouldn't follow her at all, and attacks Oscar with a devastating blow. The impact is so strong that he spits blood, feeling the overwhelming power of the enemy. With Oscar on the ground, she turns and confirms the direction from which the shot came. She calls the sniper a level 3 boy and begins to run in his direction. From a distance, another shot is fired, and she says her only mistake was not running away. The scene changes to Kian, who waits for them to wake up and act, but knows it will take him a while to arrive. He is annoyed by the slowness of the royal family, as they are not acting with the necessary urgency. But at least this way, Kaya and Oscar have been separated, giving him an opportunity to act. Suddenly, a flash of light catches his attention, and he turns, surprised by the bright light. Out of nowhere, she appears in front of him and tells him that his estimate was correct. After all, he is surprised. She arrived in a single leap and explains that the Kuya scan reveals that he was perfectly imitating the monocode of the surrounding trees. With a mocking smile on her face, she greets the level 3 mage who deceived her. Then she floats in front of him and asks him if they haven't met before. He says they met from across the street, and she confirms that they made eye contact. Then he asks her what she is doing there, but she replies that he already knows why. With a smile, she warns him that she will not back down, since she has her own reasons for getting involved in the elections. Confused, Kirian asks her why she became Mark Sweet's subordinate, which surprises her. But she laughs in his face and tells him that she is a tattoo artist and not at his level. At this, he is completely lost and asks what on earth these tattoo artists are. She is surprised that he knows the Purple Brigade, but not the tattoo artists. Kirian remembers that Oscar mentioned the brigade and that they were hired by someone powerful. Suddenly, Oscar arrives and asks if he is okay, and Kaya is surprised by his speed. He warns her that she is a monster, but they have no choice but to fight. Kirian agrees due to his promise and asks him to buy about 10 seconds. But Kaya interrupts their conversation and asks them how long they are going to keep whispering secrets. Oscar says that 10 seconds will not be easy, but he will do his best to achieve it. With that, he gets into a fighting stance, preparing to face the enemy head-on. She thanks him for waiting, but Kian says it's just a matter of basic etiquette when it comes to children. Kian smiles mockingly and says he's curious to see what else he can do. Kian concentrates, knowing that 10 seconds alone is not enough, but since the opponent is a forest warrior, he hears Oscar shouting his name. At that moment, Oscar unleashes a powerful red aura, preparing to fight seriously. Kaya is surprised and asks him if he's going to go so far as to activate his tattoo. She feels a great power pulsing through her body, releasing gigantic energy. With her tattoo glowing, she declares that this is all the power she can show for now. Fearlessly, Kaya challenges him, ready to fight the forest warrior. She also prepares to fight, unleashing a red aura and adopting her stance. Their two powers collide, creating a tornado of energy that destroys everything around them. The collision of their blows causes a huge explosion, raising a thick cloud of dust in the middle of the smoke. She manages to block one of his attacks but feels the pressure, but he got caught in a magic circle. And she says the fight just got interesting. Kaya mocks him to push his limits, and Oscar shouts in pain from the effort. With a deafening roar, he unleashes more power, trying to break her magic barrier. Suddenly, Kia's eyes fly open in surprise at what just happened, due to the effort. Oscar collapses while still standing, and she comments that he has pushed his mana to the limit. This is more annoying to her than she expected because, even if they are distant, he is still family. Thinking that Oscar is finished, she turns around and says, "It's time to face the so-called genius," but upon looking around, she sees no one and wonders where the boy went. From a distance, she sees Killian inside his own spell and realizes that he used the solitary garden. A strange sound is heard, and her expression completely changes. Surprised at that moment, a dome of light forms around her, trapping the warrior inside. She wonders if there is any spell a level 3 mage can use against her. Then she understands that it is a space that blocks both air and mana, which makes it very dangerous. The beauty of the technique impresses her, and she is curious to see what he will become. With a smile, she tells him that she can feel it. "Can't you see that your power is not enough?" She tells him that he cannot contain her perfectly with his current power level. After all, even for a genius, the difference between their levels is still too great. She tells him to stop clinging to false hopes because she is going to end this. Now inside the barrier, Kia is surprised and wonders why her tattoo is not activating. Kylian believes that a normal level 7 would beat her, but she is a forest warrior. As a former master of the White Tower, he knows all the secrets of tattoo magic. It is explained that all tower masters have access to this secret information. And ancient, her magic works with the mana on her skin, so it can be controlled by removing that mana. He feels relieved reading this, but knows that his true weapon is martial arts. With a malicious smile on her face, Kia says that the situation has become a bit complicated. She shouts that this is dangerous and lunges at the mage with absurd speed. Her goal was to limit his movements, so she prepares her ultimate combat technique. She uses the Oscar style of martial arts and invokes the wave sound technique. Kaya looks surprised at the image of water and wonders if it is an illusion. With her magic rendered useless, she knows that if she is hit head-on, it will be her end. At the last second, she manages to dodge the attack with a quick and precise movement, but to everyone's surprise, a golden barrier of light appears, blocking the attack. The image fades, and irritated by it, Killian lands a powerful blow. He just needed to hold her for a second, or maybe not even half a second to win, but Kia laughs in his face and tells him he was watching a false image. With a victorious smile, she is surprised to have managed to escape his blow. She wonders if he was just buying time for fun, or if he really felt danger there. Intrigued by the fight, she asks him who he is, as even the masters do not entertain her that much. She says that, logically, she should kill him now, but she wants to wait for his power to blossom, and calls him a toy. The villain mocks him, but he has no energy to respond. Without mana, he regrets having played instead of fighting seriously from the beginning. But he just needed to buy time, and suddenly a giant black sword falls from the sky. The woman is completely stunned by the arrival of the imposing black sword. At that moment, a mysterious man jumps from the sky, his silhouette illuminated by the full moon. He lands forcefully on the ground, creating a shockwave with his intimidating presence. The man introduces himself as Walker, Superintendent of National Security for the Empire. On the ground, Killian finally manages to say his name, Calla Rockwood, so the reinforcements can hear her. With an arrest warrant, he informs her that she is being detained for murder and arson, which she recognizes the man as the Emperor's Black Sword. A highly respected title. Killian is surprised. The Imperial family has sent a level 7 knight to help. Seeing all the soldiers, she finds the whole situation incredibly boring and uninteresting. She thinks that, with the Empire involved, it's no longer worth fighting here. So she raises her hands in surrender, but Walker warns her that he will not let her escape. She boasts of being wise for retreating, but realizes that he is not listening to her at all. With a smile, she warns him that she will not forgive him and says goodbye with an implied threat. At that moment, she uses a technique and disappears in a gust of wind, escaping quickly. A soldier asks if they should pursue her. Pharaoh Walker says it's useless, because she is good. Then he turns around and orders his men to continue with the ordered siege. Then he approaches the fallen Killian and asks what he was thinking by attacking like that. But he quickly realizes that the mage has exhausted all his energy and fainted right there. With a hand on his shoulder, he says, "The boy held up well until the end." The scene changes, and Killian suddenly wakes up in what looks like a well-kept garden. He looks at his gem, and with a confused mind, he thinks it was all just a dream. A man asks Raiden what he is looking at, and he replies that it's the family portrait. He proudly shows the photo, but his friend points out that little Calla was crying in it. The friend asks why he didn't take off his mask, but Raiden says he needs to maintain his dignity. The man jokes that his face is too handsome, and that Raiden wanted a more masculine one. Then he congratulates Raiden on his second child, and Raiden suggests he join the tower. But Raiden says he doesn't care if his children don't become mages. Surprising his friend, he explains that a dream is something personal and that his children will know what justice is. With a smile, the man agrees with the wise words of his great friend. Raiden, still, he asks Raiden to send the children to the tower, and Raiden says he will think about it. The scene returns to the present with Killian opening his eyes and thinking it was all a dream. He sits up in bed apologizing to Raiden and hears a strange noise in the room. Turning around, he sees Oscar peeling an apple and asks him what he's doing there. Oscar is surprised by the question and replies that he was just peeling an apple to eat. Killian asks him if he has to do it in front of him. Oscar says the fruit tastes better that way. Then Killian thanks him for the apple and says it was really delicious. Then he asks him how much time has passed, and Oscar replies that it has been 3 long days. He realizes it was the same priestess who healed him, and Oscar assures him that he will be fine. Then he mentions that old Maxim gave them a good scolding, which makes Kieran relieved to have been unconscious during that time. Oscar changes the subject and warns him to be careful, as there is a mage hunter in the north. Worried, he asks him if anyone from his tower has been captured, as among the victims are level 5 mages. Fortunately, not yet, but his friend warns him not to let his guard down, as other towers have already been attacked. The hunter is in his territory and attacks mages who are alone, so they will be safer together. Oscar then confirms that he will return with him to the White Tower, as he has found the traitor he was looking for. Killian worries about him, but Oscar assures him that forest warriors recover very quickly. But the concern was not only physical, it was about having fought against his own family. At that moment, Hake opens the bedroom door and calls the two heroes. The boy runs in, incredibly relieved to see Oscar standing. Oscar thanks him for calling the priest, and Jack gives him a gift he had prepared for when Killian finally woke up from the fight. It was the payment for his services. Hake apologizes for not being more, but Killian says it's enough. The boy bows in gratitude, and Oscar just reminds them that Mark was supposed to pay. With a smile, Jack says his dream has changed, and he no longer wants to be a politician like his father. Killian, radiant with pride, tells him he could be a fantastic mage if he tried. But the boy reveals that he is going to join national security to punish evil and save the innocent. After he leaves, Walker comments with a serious expression that the incident has been resolved. He explains that all the criminals have been arrested, including the mastermind, Mark Sweet, who resists. Walker looks at him coldly and says that he is the executive behind the Happy Ending cartel. Then he orders the guards to take him away, and we see that his daughter has also been captured. Desperate, Mark shouts his daughter's name, Ara, seeing the guards take her away, and begs her to be released, swearing black and blue that the girl is completely innocent. But Ara is furious and shouts at her father for causing all this mess. Mark is completely shocked and speechless at his own daughter's harsh words. Back in the room, Killian asks if Arrowsweet has also been arrested, and Walker confirms it. He explains that she will go to jail because she put a bounty on their heads. Then Walker addresses Oscar and mentions that Jack told him about the crystal ball. Killian confirms it was him, but immediately worries about how he will explain that he knows the code. Walker says his decision was incredible, which makes Killian sweat a little. And nervous, then he asks if the master of the magic tower is okay, which leaves Killian completely confused. With an awkward laugh, Killian is relieved to see that he thought the contact was with her. Then Walker announces that he has to leave, checks his watch, and tells them to take good care of themselves. Killian thanks him and says goodbye, watching the man turn and walk towards the door. But before leaving, he stops for a second, as if he still has something to say. He turns around and asks if all White Tower mages are like Killian. And Killian wants to know what he means by that. Wowaker just gives him a thoughtful look, but dismisses it and tells the two to rest, leaving the room and closing the door. In his thoughts, he reflects that the mages he knows only care about their own benefit. However, the two he met from the White Tower seem to be very different from all of them. He finally understands why the White Tower was so cherished by the previous generation. Looking at an image from the past, he begins to understand a little the reason for so much nostalgia. Oscar Sage was the symbol of the White Tower, its strength and its guarantee of future. And as long as he stood firm, the system held. But as soon as he disappeared, everything began to rot from within: betrayals, power struggles, fear of change, and a gradual loss of authority. His second life is not a story of revenge through power, because formally he is weak, but revenge through the mind, experience, and cold calculation of someone who has already seen the end of the world, and who will no longer allow himself to be naive. It is especially revealing that the threat now does not come from a demonic army, but from people, System Tao, and those who fear losing control, and therefore poison conspiracies. And mage hunters seem more dangerous than any battlefield. The White Tower no longer dominates. It now finds itself on the verge of being expelled from the group of the four great towers. And that creates a much more intense tension than any individual duel, because the question is no longer about winning a fight, but about surviving as an institution. The contrast between the old generation, who lived and died for ideals, and the new one, who begins to act more pragmatically, marks a new direction in history. And if before Oscar wanted to save everyone, now he wants to protect his own. And that is a much more dangerous motivation. The Empire already looks at the White Tower differently. The mage hunter acts within his territory, and the enemies no longer attack head-on. They wait for the moment when weakness becomes evident. And it is precisely there that the former master's experience can change the rules of the game. Because if someone who has already died once for the world decides to stop sacrificing himself and begins to build power quietly and systematically, then Oscar's return will not just be a personal story, but the beginning of a redistribution of power among all the towers. And the strongest part of this story is not even reincarnation itself, but that this second chance does not feel like a gift from destiny, but like a test, if a hero who was once a legend can become a strategist in a world that has learned to fear the strong.